Chapter 5143. Zi Chen came to the outskirts of the city. After so many years, he finally came out again. This area had changed greatly long ago. Buildings were everywhere, and the construction was very neat. No one recognized Zi Chen when he arrived. After he told them the reason for his visit and found out that he was looking for Miao Pengfei, many people looked at him strangely. It was rare to see someone daring to call the Lord by his name. "Follow me." Someone seemed to feel that Zi Chen was not ordinary. He took the initiative to lead the way for Zi Chen. When they arrived at Miao Pengfei's residence, the person did not knock on the door. Instead, he cupped his fists and said, "Lord, someone is looking for you." "Who is looking for me?" Miao Pengfei's voice came from the room. When he opened the door and saw Zi Chen standing there, he was stunned. He was stunned. He could not believe his eyes. He blinked hard and rubbed them. The subordinate was also stunned. Why was the Lord doing this? "Zi Chen, it's really you!" Miao Pengfei shouted excitedly. The subordinate who led the way was shocked when he heard the name. He looked at the person beside him in shock. Now, in this area, the name Zi Chen had become a legend. In the past, this place was extremely chaotic. Many people died because of all kinds of embezzlement. After Zi Chen appeared, he changed everything with his own strength. In addition, Zi Chen himself was also extraordinary. He eventually became the shadow destroyer with the highest status. All along, everyone knew that Zi Chen, who had gone to Pofa City, was still guarding this place. This was also the main reason why this place was becoming more and more prosperous. However, they had only heard of Zi Chen's legend, but had never seen him in person. They did not expect to see him today. "Go find Hu Jinglai." Miao Pengfei looked at his subordinate, who was in a daze, and said, "Tell him that Zi Chen is here." "Yes." The subordinate nodded and left immediately. He looked back from time to time. He still could not believe that this was Lord Zi Chen. "Why are you here?" Miao Pengfei was very excited to see Zi Chen. "I'm here to see how you're enjoying yourself outside." Zi Chen said, "You're already in the 4th strength state. Why don't you go to Pofa City?" Miao Pengfei said, "I heard that it's very chaotic inside. It's fine for me to stay outside. Moreover, if I were to leave, I wouldn't feel at ease here. After all, this is what we worked so hard for. We can't go back to the past." Miao Pengfei pointed at the surroundings and said, "Look, compared to before, the area has become much wider. Furthermore, we have also discovered more mineral veins." At this point, Miao Pengfei suddenly said with some shame, "I forgot. You didn't gain anything from it." Zi Chen patted his head. "You're so pretentious." Miao Pengfei smiled. If he really cared about this, he wouldn't be Zi Chen. 2 hours later, Hu Zhengkai arrived. Right now, his status was equal to Miao Pengfei's, and he was in another camp. "Zi Chen, it's really you." Hu Zheng came closer, still in disbelief. "Why did you suddenly come out?" "I'm here to look for you. You two discuss. One of you will stay outside, and the other will go in to help me," Zi Chen said. The two were stunned, then looked at Zi Chen, as if trying to figure out how much truth there was in his words. "This is only temporary. After everything is settled here, the other one will go in too," Zi Chen said. "Are you two really going to stay here forever?" Hu Zheng scratched his head. "What's wrong with this place?" Zi Chen said, "This place is pretty good, but it's a little small. You two discuss and see who will go in with me. Also, you two send the order. I need to find this, and see if I can find similar mineral veins." Zi Chen took out a few dozen black stones. The two of them took the black stones and examined them carefully. "What is this?" Miao Pengfei asked. Zi Chen explained, "It's a kind of power that contains the power of a shadow destroyer. You can't sense it, but if you find something similar, you can get someone to bring it to the city and let me judge." "I'm afraid there's no shadow destroyer power here, right?" Hu Zheng said, "If you're talking about the power of a shadow destroyer beast, we might be able to help." Shadow Destroyer Beast? Zichen was startled. Hu Zheng said, "Yes, there's only a Shadow Destroyer Beast outside. Where would there be a Shadow Destroyer? But even if it's the power of a Shadow Destroyer Beast, ordinary people might not be able to get it. The Shadow Destroyer Beast is invisible and silent when it kills." Zichen was stunned. Hu Zhang held the black stone in his hand and said, "Let's try, but don't get your hopes up." Shadow Destroyer Beast. Yes, Shadow Destroyer Beast. Zichen's eyes suddenly lit up. Why didn't he think of that? A Shadow Destroyer Beast was a dead Shadow Destroyer, and in this area there were vanishing Shadow Beasts. Then, would there be a blackstone mine in the place where they lived? After all, others might not be able to feel the power in the black stone, but the Shadow Destroyer could. Zichen looked at Hu Zhang. It was Hu Zheng's words that had given him a clear direction. "You two have a good discussion. I'll make a trip to the Kill Crystal Mine." Zichen left after saying that. "Be careful," Miao Pengfei reminded. "I heard that there are always abnormalities there. It's already been sealed." Zichen waved his hand at the two of them without even turning his head. His figure quickly disappeared. Along the way, many people came out and looked at Zichen with reverence. Evidently, the crowd already knew his identity. After leaving the area far away, Zichen took to the air and flew into the distance. This caused even more exclamations. It was the first time they saw someone fly. "What do you think?" After Zichen left, Hu Zhang looked at Miao Pengfei. Miao Pengfei said, "I'll go first. I'll leave this place to you. I've always wanted to go to Pofa City to take a look. With Zichen's help, it shouldn't be bad." Hu Zhang didn't argue and nodded directly. Zichen went straight to the Kill Crystal Mine. This place was his blessed land, and he hadn't been here for a long time. Most importantly, there were Shadow Destroyer Beasts here too. This mine had been sealed, and there was no one there. Many buildings had collapsed. It was already nighttime. Zichen didn't enter the mine to investigate, but he summoned the Massacre Spirit. The Massacre Spirit was very sensitive to killing intent. It entered the mine on its own. Zichen walked nearby. Perhaps he could find a Shadow Destroyer Beast. Of course, the prerequisite was that the Shadow Destroyer Beast he saw before hadn't disappeared or left. After walking for 2 hours, Zichen, who found nothing, picked up some dry wood and started a bonfire. Next, he just had to wait for the Shadow Destroyer Beast to come. Another 2 hours later, Zichen sensed something unusual. He got up and looked into the distance. A figure appeared there. In the past, Zichen would only feel fear when he saw such a being. But now that he knew their identity, he couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity and sadness. He took out a black stone and instantly drew the energy from it. Then he raised his hand and waved the energy forward. The energy directly entered the Shadow Destroyer Beast's body. The Shadow Destroyer Beast's originally dim body seemed to solidify a little. It stood there a little confused. It seemed to have never encountered such a situation. Chapter 5144. The Shadow Destroyer Beast, or rather, the Shadow Destroyer in soul form, stood there motionless. It seemed to have not reacted from before. After all, the beings he had encountered before could not see him. Zichen said again, "Take me to where you're hiding." The other party still did not respond. Zichen thought for a moment, then released the Shadow Destroyer's aura. At the same time, he used the Shadow Destroyer's soul power and said, "Do you have any other companions who can take me to where they are?" This time, the other party seemed to understand. It turned around and walked into the distance. Zichen followed behind. About 2 hours later, Zichen encountered the second Shadow Destroyer. The other party flew over, as if asking the previous one why he had brought people here. Zichen could not understand their conversation, but he knew what to do. He raised his hand and absorbed the energy of a black stone, sending it into the second Shadow Destroyer's body. The Shadow Destroyer was taken aback and did not ask further. Then the two of them helped to lead the way. This time, they walked for a full 4 hours. The sky was about to brighten. Zichen saw some shadow destroyers gathering here. When they saw Zichen, the uninvited guest, they all flew over, seeming very vigilant. Zichen swept his gaze and looked ahead. There were about 50 to 60 shadow destroyers. Some of them were coming over, but some were in the distance and did not do anything when they saw him coming. There was a mountain peak here. A mountain peak that was not very tall stood alone here. The shadow destroyers in the distance were leaning against the mountain peak, their entire bodies almost sticking to it. Zichen walked forward. Some shadow destroyers tried to rush toward Zichen and attack him. Buzz! Zichen released his shadow destroyer aura. Under this aura, the shadow destroyers all stopped. They felt a strong pressure, like a bloodline suppression. Zichen ignored these shadow destroyers. With soul power perception, he naturally knew that these beings looked strong, but were actually very weak. Some could barely float and had no fighting power at all. To put it bluntly, he was just being pretentious. If Zichen wanted to, he only needed a single thought to create a storm of soul power to wipe them out. Zichen walked forward and saw a very small shadow destroyer curled up there. Judging from his size, he looked like a human child. His aura was very weak. Right now, he was in a curled-up state. It seemed like he was trying to minimize his consumption of energy. Its body clung tightly to the mountain peak. Looking ahead, Zichen discovered some similar shadow destroyers. Their movements were almost identical to the one in front of him. They looked like the old, weak, sick, and disabled humans. Suddenly, the motionless child stood up. His originally weak soul force suddenly surged and became extremely active. Then, the soul power around his body began to dissipate. When the other shadow destroyers saw this, they all stood there and looked at each other. His body began to disintegrate. He was about to disappear. The surge of soul power was just a momentary lapse of consciousness. The shadow destroyer who had brought Zichen here immediately stepped forward and spat out a beam of soul light. This beam of light entered the other party's body and stabilized his dissipating soul. But it was useless. After a breath, the other party's soul continued to dissipate. That shadow destroyer spat out 2 more beams of soul power, but they were still useless. Just then, a shadow destroyer stepped forward and seemed to want to take the other party away by force. Clearly, this shadow destroyer's life had come to an end. Zichen was a little moved. He took out 2 black stones, immediately absorbed the energy within, and waved them forward. The energy was like a ball of soul power light that landed on the child. The soul power surged and enveloped the child's body. His soul that was about to collapse stabilized once again. Such a scene attracted the attention of the group of shadow destroyers. Zichen took out 2 more black stones, absorbed the energy within, and then sent the energy into the other party's body. The child absorbed the soul power, and his body became solid again. Soon his soul stabilized. After waiting for orders to protect him, he immediately looked at Zichen and bowed to him. Swoosh! Zichen raised his hand and sent several more balls of energy into the bodies of the shadow destroyers next to him. These were people whose soul power was extremely weak and could not hold on for long. With this soul power, at least they would not die for the time being. The other shadow destroyers all gathered around. All of them looked at Zichen curiously and expectantly. Zichen looked at them with guilt in his eyes. If he had not come out this time and happened to hear Hu Zheng's words, he would not have thought of this at all. If he had come a long time ago, he would have been able to save many shadow destroyers. Then, Zichen took out a large number of black stones and threw them forward. The black stones scattered and went straight for the shadow destroyers. Every shadow destroyer received a piece of black stone. After receiving the black stones, they began to absorb the energy within. Of course, they were not as fast as Zichen, but they could maintain their own lives. Seeing this, Zichen relaxed and walked forward. If he was not mistaken, this mountain peak definitely contained black stones. Otherwise, they would not be leaning so tightly against the mountain peak when they were about to die. but they did not have the power to break it open. So even though there was a treasure mountain, they did not have the key to open it. Zi-Chen had not opened it yet. The mine in the periphery did not belong to him yet. If he opened it rashly, it would only help others. Moreover, with the shadow destroyers here, no one else could discover this place. If he wanted this place, he had to go back and think of a way to take it for himself. Zi-Chen walked closer and released his perception, wanting to explore the mountain peak. He did not sense anything, but he believed in these shadow destroyers and their instinctive perception. Zi-Chen took out almost 1,000 black stones and placed them here. These black stones were enough to maintain their lives. Then Zi-Chen turned and left. Some of the shadow destroyers followed. Zi-Chen looked at them and said, "You stay here and guard this place." Not caring if they could understand, Zi-Chen used the identity of a shadow destroyer to send a spiritual message to them. Finally, he pointed at the mountain peak. Then Zi-Chen left. When he returned to the place with the killing crystal mine, the sky was already bright. Zi-Chen did not see the killing spirit outside the cave. Perhaps it was devouring the killing intent in the crystals. Zi-Chen decided to go in and take a look. After all, the last time he was here, he was only in the 5-strength realm. Now that he was in the 6-strength realm, his combat power was stronger. Even if there was any danger inside, he could deal with it. Zi-Chen walked forward and entered the mine. Chapter 5145. No one was more familiar with this mineral vein in front of him than Zi-Chen. The path deeper was not wet, and he did not sense any killing intent along the way. It should have been absorbed by the slaughter spirit. Zi-Chen, who was familiar with the path, was trying to sense the slaughter spirit. As he continued forward, his soul power was the first to spread out. Soon, Zi-Chen's expression changed. Swoosh! His figure disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already deep in the mine. His slaughter spirit was crashing around in a small area, as if it was sealed by a strange force. Zi-Chen was about 10 feet away from the slaughter spirit at this moment. He did not go forward immediately. Instead, he looked ahead and said, "Come out, I know you're here." A person walked out from the front. It was a young man wearing a black robe. His aura was very cold, and his eyes were without any color. "I've seen you before." Zi-Chen looked at the other party. The last time he was here, he saw a flash of light. At that time, he thought it was an illusion. "I've seen you too." The other party said, his voice very cold. This coldness was not deliberate, but innate, because if he guessed correctly, the other party should have been revived from the kill crystal. Zi-Chen pointed at the slaughter spirit and said, "Give it back to me." The other party said, "It can stay here." Zi-Chen frowned slightly and said, "It's mine." "I know." The other party said again, "It needs the killing intent here, so it can stay here." Zi-Chen looked at the other party and did not say anything. The other party took the initiative to say, "This is my gratitude to you." Zi-Chen did not know where the gratitude came from. To be honest, he had avoided danger several times through the kill crystal here. "My name is Zi-Chen, Yuan Sha." After saying this, the sealed slaughter spirit turned into a stream of light and flew back to Zi-Chen's side. Obviously, Yuan Sha wanted Zi-Chen to make a choice. Zi-Chen looked at the slaughter spirit. Through the emotional response, the slaughter spirit came here and did not encounter any danger. Shua. In the next moment, Zi-Chen controlled the slaughter spirit to fly in front of Yuan Sha. Yuan Sha stretched out 2 fingers and grabbed the spirit of slaughter. Zi-Chen asked, "When can I take it away?" "Anytime." This allowed Zi-Chen to relax. After nodding at the other party, he turned around and left. Now that he no longer had to worry about this area, he had to think of a way to control this area. After returning to the encampment, Zi-Chen told Miao Pengfei that there was no rush to leave with him. They could talk about it after dealing with the matters here. After that, he returned to Shattering Dharma City alone. When they arrived at Spiritual Spell Hall No. 4, Khan was already waiting there. He informed Phoebe and the others that they had started moving. During this period, there was another piece of bad news. That was, they didn't find any blackstone in the mines they had purchased. However, he had only seen a rough idea of what was going on and had yet to dig deeper. He could not rule out the possibility of a miracle happening later on. Oliver had failed outside and failed to bring the black stone back. It could be said that he had lost the face of the radical faction. After returning, he was unwilling to give up. He started to sow discord and distort the facts. Hence, when Dua and I brought back 100,000 blackstones, he was still criticized by the radical faction for bringing back too little. They said that Zi-Chin, as a member of Shattering Dharma City, should contribute all the blackstones for free. Dua and I was too lazy to care about the radical faction's actions. After taking back the blackstones, Dua and I received a message a few days later. No matter what, he had to get more blackstones. Hence, Dua and I went to Zi-Chin again and said that he wanted to buy more blackstones. During this period, Dua and I also revealed some information, such as the strong willpower inside. Zi-Chin naturally understood what he meant. He also knew that he couldn't keep all the blackstones. In the end, each blackstone was priced at 2,000 streams of energy. During this period, Zi-Chin also made a request, which was to have absolute control of the area outside. Dua and I was puzzled. Zi-Chin explained the reason. At the same time, he also said that it was possible to find more blackstones outside. Dua and I agreed. This kind of thing wasn't difficult for him. Plus, Zi-Chin had plenty of energy now. Hence, after paying 10 million streams of energy, he bought the area outside the city controlled by Miao Pengfei and the others. From today onwards, all the resources would be handed over to Zi-Chin. With Duni's face, this price was actually half selling and half giving away. There was almost no loss, but it would take many years to recover. When Dua and I came out of Shattering Soul Palace, he was holding 2 special pieces of paper. He handed them to Zi-Chin and said, "You can use them twice. You don't have to say anything to Shattering Soul Palace. You can forcefully buy the area." This was equivalent to giving Zi-Chin absolute authority over the 2 mineral veins. Of course, the premise was that Zi-Chin could find 2 blackstone mines here. This time, when Dua and I went back, he brought back 200,000 blackstones. Of course, this time he bought them at a high price. Zi-Chin didn't stay idle. He gave Khan a piece of paper so that he could make his own decision at a critical moment. Khan took this piece of paper and went to find Phoebe and the others. He also hoped that these people could find a blackstone mine as soon as possible. After Marcus had made arrangements for the original blackstone vein, he led his men to the other abandoned veins to mine. This time, they would dig deeper to see if there would be a miracle. Although these people didn't dig for blackstones anymore, they still had a considerable income every day. Everyone was busy, and there was a reward for being busy. Therefore, every day, Zi-Chin would pay a certain price in order to search for the blackstone vein. Zi-Chin left Shattering Spell City again and went to find Miao Pengfei. He asked Miao Pengfei to find some relatively reliable people. He was ready to start digging for blackstone mines here. Before that, Zi-Chin had to go there personally to take a look. Calculating the time, the Shadow Destroyers should have almost finished refining the blackstones. When he arrived at the mountain peak, Zi-Chin discovered that there were still hundreds of blackstones. It seemed that after he left, they hadn't fought over them and were even trying their best to save as much as possible. When Zi-Chin arrived at the mountain peak, all the Shadow Destroyers surrounded him. Zi-Chin raised his hand and waved it forward. The rocks in front of him rolled down. Zi-Chin began to dig deeper, and soon a deep pit appeared. The Shadow Destroyers guessed what Zi-Chin was going to do, and they all became excited. An hour later, Zi-Chin dug out a huge piece of black stone with a clanging sound. After digging out the black stone and sensing it carefully, Zi-Chin's eyes lit up. It was indeed a blackstone mine. The energy contained within even surpassed that of the mine in Shattering Spell City. The other shadow destroyers also gathered around and stared curiously at the black stone. Zi-Chin put the black stone aside and continued digging. Then he saw an endless stream of ore. He roughly estimated that this mine was not small. Such a mine naturally needed someone to guard it, even a powerhouse. Chapter 5146. Zi-Chin was still busy outside Pofa City. After all, the crystals found in this black stone vein were of higher quality. He could not afford to lose them. He walked around the mountain peak and dug holes in several places. He found black stones all over the place. Wherever he went, the shadow destroyers followed. After seeing Zi-Chin dig out the black stones, they were all very excited. Zi-Chin gave them the black stones. This mine was not small, and Zi-Chin was very satisfied. Next, it was time to think about the mining. And what should he do with these shadow destroyers? Unfortunately, none of them could speak. They could not even communicate with soul power. Therefore, some of Zi-Chin's ideas could not be implemented. Right now, what he wanted to do the most was to gather all the shadow extinguishers here. After all, with these black stones, their lives were not in danger. Next, as long as they kept refining, they could grow, communicate, and finally have true bodies. Suddenly, Zi-Chin thought of the old man from Soul Mountain. Perhaps he could go back again and bring some shadow destroyers out from there? This idea was clearly feasible. Before that, the shadow destroyers still needed to stay here. Without Zi-Chin's orders, they knew to guard this place. Zi-Chin started to turn back. When he passed by the kill crystal vein, Zi-Chin went in again and saw Yuan Sha. Yuan Sha said, "You want to take the killer weapon?" "No, I'm just passing by." After saying that, Zi-Chin left, leaving Yuan Sha behind. He was a little confused. After locking onto the location of the vein, Zi-Chin returned to the station. When Miao Pengfei and Hu Zheng saw Zi-Chin, they immediately saluted him and respectfully called him sir. Looking at the two of them, Zi-Chin knew that everything was clear. Next, they were completely Zi-Chin's subordinates, and this place was also Zi-Chin's property. After calling him sir, Miao Pengfei said, "Zi-Chin, you're too late. We've already mined a lot of the veins here, and no other veins have been found. I'm afraid you won't make a lot of money this time. By the way, how did you take over?" Zi-Chin raised 3 fingers and said, 30 million streams of power. When Miao Pengfei heard this, his eyes widened. He didn't expect it to be so expensive. Actually, it's not that much. It's more like a half sale. Zi-Chin smiled. If they had known in advance that there was a black stone vein in the periphery, they definitely wouldn't have sold it, even if the price was 100 times higher. Even so, it was because of Duni's face. One had to know that his reputation was definitely not limited to just 30 million streams of power. Let's get ready to look for him. Zi-Chin looked at the two of them and said, "I found something outside." Miao Pengfei's expression changed as he asked, "It can't be that killing crystal lode again, right?" "No, it's something else." Zi-Chin said, "Tell them that the reward is very generous, but they only need to be in the 2nd force realm or above." Miao Pengfei nodded. Hu Zheng hesitated. Zi-Chin looked at him. "What do you want to ask?" Hu Zheng said awkwardly, "I have some people from the Jutian city. Can they go and help?" Back then, Zi-Chin had been schemed against in Jutian city. Many people had misunderstood him. Originally, this place was under Hu Zheng's control. Since Zi-Chin was in the Pofa city, he brought almost all the people in the city over. It was also from then on that he and Miao Pengfei each managed a station. Now Zi-Chin was his boss. Naturally, he had to tell him the truth. Zi-Chin smiled. "You don't have to ask me. You're the one in charge here. As long as you trust them, you can put them in an important position." Zi-Chin returned to the Pofa city and went straight to the Hall of Spiritual Spells. At the door, he saw Michael and the others. They were coming out of the Hall of Spiritual Spells. They didn't look like they were here to cause trouble. Instead, they looked like they had just finished shopping. Zi-Chin was a little surprised. When they saw Zichin, they sneered. Michael took out a piece of black stone and waved it at Zichin. The best part is yet to come. After that, the group walked away proudly. Zichin was left with a confused face. After entering the Hall of Spiritual Spells, Maria walked over and followed Zichin upstairs. She said as they walked, "Master, Kant sent a message yesterday. A group of people is following them outside. Wherever they go, those people will follow. It seems that they are also looking for the mineral vein." Zichin understood why Michael and the others were smiling. He smiled and said, "I know." Maria turned around and was about to go downstairs. Zichin suddenly said, "Prepare some martial crystals and give them to the people who came here to deliver the black stone. Tell them it's a reward for Michi and the others." After all, this mineral vein was discovered by Michi and the others. Now that its value was announced, they should be rewarded. Okay. Zichin went upstairs and sat on a chair. Then he started to daydream. These days he seemed to be very busy. He didn't even have time to cultivate. And now it seemed that he still had to go to the world where the Soul Mountain was. After thinking about it carefully, Zichin decided to wait for a while. He asked Maria to find a way to contact Kant and ask him to come back. 3 days later, Kant came back. Zichin asked, "How's the situation?" Kant said, "We chased them away, but they still didn't give up. They are following us for several miles. It's obvious that they have other ideas. Ignore them." Zichin didn't have to worry about this. Phoebe and the others didn't seem to be easy to deal with. It was good enough as long as they didn't find trouble with others. If others found trouble with them, they were simply courting death. Zichin looked at Kant and said, "I called you back this time to ask you, are there many spellbreakers in the city?" "Definitely not as many as spirit spellbreakers, but there are still many of them." Kant asked curiously, "Why do you ask this question?" Zichin said, "I plan to have you find more spellbreakers to search for or veins together, other than the usual rewards. Anyone who finds a black stone or vein will be rewarded with an inner core, regardless of who it is. If the ore vein is big enough, he will be guaranteed to advance to the 6-force estate." Although Zichin hadn't advanced to the 7-force estate, he had the ability to help others advance to the 6-force estate. For example, Kant could advance so quickly because of Zichin's gift back then. Zichin's reward was naturally targeted at those low-level spellbreakers. Michael and the others found some spirit spellbreakers to cause trouble. If he also found spirit spellbreakers to search for or veins, there would be conflicts. If they found or veins and others said that they found them, it would be troublesome. Therefore, Zichin directly found spellbreakers. Their status was higher, and spirit spellbreakers wouldn't dare to mess around. Although the daily expenditure was great, as long as they could successfully find blackstone or vein, Zichin would make a huge profit. Zichin didn't believe that they couldn't even find a blackstone or vein outside such a big city. "Okay, I'll go find them now. It shouldn't be a problem." Zichin gave high rewards to those spellbreakers every day. Otherwise, Phoebe and the others wouldn't be happy. Therefore, he believed that the others would agree. Kant left. He guessed that Miao Pengfei should have found all the people. But at the thought of those shadow destroyers, Zichin still decided to go to the Soul Mountain first. After all, it was easier to communicate with shadow destroyers. Chapter 5147. Zichin headed to the Soul Mountain. Along the way, he met 2 teams of spellbreakers, but they avoided him. The Soul Mountain was a hidden place. He did not want to be discovered. After arriving at the Soul Mountain, he was warmly welcomed. Time was tight, so Zichin explained his intentions. The old man was surprised. He said, "Why don't I accompany you?" Zichin shook his head. The old man was the backbone here. If he left, the other shadow destroyers would not be at ease. Moreover, Zichin was not sure what would happen outside. He did not dare to take the risk. "I'll go." At this moment, Xiaowei stood out from the crowd. She was the one who brought Zichen here and changed the fate of the Shadow Destroyer clan. After refining the black stone Zichen gave her, she could speak now. She no longer needed to communicate with her soul. The old man looked at Zichen. Zichen nodded. This was what he had been thinking since the beginning. Xiaowei's soul aura fluctuated violently. She was very excited, because she could go out and see the outside world. In the end, Zichen only took Xiaowei and left. Because this was just a trial, he could not bring too many people. The two began to return. Walking in the forest, Xiaowei looked around curiously. She was like a bird out of a cage. Sometimes she would ask some questions. In the past, she only dared to wander around nearby. She would not go so far. No one could see Xiaowei, but there were some accidents. So when they were about to reach the periphery of the mountain, the two deliberately waited for the sky to turn dark. After dark, all the adventurers would go back. Almost no one would spend the night outside. When the sky turned dark, the law-breaking beasts would come out. But to Zichen, these law-breaking beasts were not a threat. After killing two along the way, the two walked out of the mountain. The sky was still dark. Zichen did not return to the Hall of Spiritual Spells. Instead, he took Xiaowei directly to the teleportation location. In this Dharma-breaking city, there were many lawbreakers. They could sense Xiaowei's presence. This was the first time Xiaowei had come to a city. Even though it was night, she was still very envious when she saw these buildings. Zichen spoke very little along the way. In the eyes of others, Zichen was the only one hurrying along in the dark. When they arrived at the entrance, Zichen opened a spatial door, and the two of them walked out. Now that they had left Pofa City, there was no need to rush. The two of them walked at a normal speed toward the encampment. As the sky brightened, Zichen arrived at Miao Pengfei's base. It was Xiaowei's first time seeing so many humans. She looked around curiously. None of the people walking around could see her. Zichen met with Miao Pengfei. The other party had already prepared some people. Currently, there were 300 people. Zichen said, "Bring more things. We need to build a camp in the early stages. This mining will take a long time. Safety first." In the outer perimeter, everyone's cultivation levels were generally very low. Add to that the threat of the lawbreaker beasts, and everyone had to be careful. Furthermore, from what Miao Pengfei and the others knew, besides lawbreaker beasts, there were also shadow destroyers, which were the most terrifying. As for the secret of the shadow destroyer beasts, Zichen did not purposely explain it to them. It would be less troublesome if fewer people knew about it. Because they needed to build a camp in the early stages, in order to speed up the process, Miao Pengfei stopped mining and formed a team of thousands. This team followed Zichen. They brought the resources and walked toward the Blackstone mine in a grandiose manner. At night, everyone was divided into dozens of small teams and gathered around the bonfire. The bonfire shone brightly, but everyone still had a strong sense of uneasiness. This was even more obvious on the third night. This was because there were already shadow destroyer beasts here. Shadow destroyer beasts killed people. Whether they could survive depended entirely on their own luck. Don't worry. With Master Zichen here, I guarantee that nothing will happen to you. Miao Pengfei saw that everyone was nervous, so he immediately comforted them. However, there are too many teams here, and the area was too wide. Those who were with Zichen were naturally not afraid, but those who were not, especially those in the outer perimeter, were even more worried when they heard this reassurance. It proved that there really were shadow destroyer beasts here. Seeing everyone's uneasiness, Zichen said loudly, "Don't worry. As long as a shadow destroyer beast appears, I can see it no matter how far away it is. What you should be most worried about now is the lawbreaker beasts that might come in groups, not the shadow destroyer beasts." With Zichen's words, everyone was completely relieved. As for the lawbreaker beasts, their large team was not afraid at all. Zichen led the team and walked for a full 8 days before reaching their destination. At first, Everyone was very worried and afraid of encountering shadow destroyer beasts. However, after several nights, they did not encounter any shadow destroyer beasts, and no one had any accidents. Everyone was relieved. Of course, they did not know that there was a shadow destroyer beast following them along the way. When they were still some distance away from the mineral vein, Zichen signaled for the team to move forward at normal speed. Meanwhile, he brought Xiao Wei and sped up towards the mineral vein. When they arrived, Zichen realized that there seemed to be more shadow destroyers here. When the shadow destroyers saw Zichen, they immediately surrounded him. Some of them were looking at Xiao Wei. Xiao Wei started to communicate with them. After all, she used to be like these beings. Perhaps they shared a common language. As expected, after a short while, both sides were able to communicate normally. Let them stay away from this mineral vein. Zichen pointed to an area in the distance and said, "Next, I will get people to build some buildings there. They will live there from now on." Xiao Wei immediately communicated with the shadow destroyers and quickly got a response. Everyone started to retreat. During this time, Zichen did not forget to remind them not to attack other humans. These shadow destroyers did not have any objections. Because they had black stones, they did not need to rely on devouring souls to survive. This was what Xiao Wei had said in advance. In the future, Zichen would provide them with black stones. Xiao Wei went to arrange everything. Zichen stayed here and waited for Miao Pengfei and the others to arrive. Half an hour later, the main force arrived. With this mountain peak as the center, they started to build a few stations within a few thousand zhang radius. Miao Pengfei walked to the side of the mountain peak and looked at the traces of digging. He asked, "These are the things?" Zichen nodded and said, "After these buildings are completed, leave the miners here. For every piece of, or you dig out, you will be rewarded with 5 strands of energy. $1 for 5 strands, not 5 strands a day." Miao Pengfei was taken aback. Their rewards in this peripheral area were calculated by the day. Zichen said again, $1 for 5 strands. Such a high reward. Even I want to work here. Miao Pengfei looked shocked. What is this thing? Why is it so expensive? You also said it's expensive. Then don't make any mistakes. Zichen reminded him. These black stones are very useful to me. Miao Pengfei patted his chest and said, "Don't worry. I can station here and supervise personally." Zichen smiled and patted Miao Pengfei's shoulder. "During this period, I really need you here to supervise personally. In the future, I will transfer more people here." Chapter 5148. The plot is stuck and will be updated tomorrow. Thunder Force will not be updated today. It is currently in your hands. Please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 5149. Hey, I say, you guys hurry up and finish the work here. A second 4-state martial artist shouted at them, "Hurry up, let's end this quickly." Then he touched the back of his neck and muttered, "Why do I feel a chill on my neck?" "I feel the same way." A first-strength realm cultivator walked over and said, "It's a very sinister feeling, like being targeted by prey." The others all nodded, but when they looked up, the sun was high in the sky and there was no danger around. The second-strength realm cultivator said, "With Lord Zichen here, there will definitely be no danger. Perhaps it's because no one has been here for a long time and it's less lively. That's why I feel this way. Hurry up." These people were temporarily transferred here by Miao Pengfei to help the shadow destroyers build houses. They did not know that there were dozens of shadow destroyers watching them work a few hundred feet away. It was normal to feel a chill on the back of their neck. After all, one of these shadow destroyers could kill all of them. Zichen stood alone by the mountain peak. Miao Pengfei had already gone to instruct the others. After the buildings were built, it was time to mine. After mining, it had to be given to him. This required someone, at least at the 6th strength realm, to be in charge of this. Zi-Chan lacked such a person by his side. Right now, he missed his companions. If they were all here, then Zi-Chan would not have to worry about manpower. The construction here would obviously take some time. During this time, Zi-Chan planned to let Xiaowei lead the shadow destroyers to find their companions nearby. There was black stone here. They could refine it and prevent others from being killed at the same time. Before Xiaowei left, Zi-Chan reminded her not to forget to mark the place if she discovered a large number of shadow destroyers gathering. It was very likely to contain a black stone mine. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Zi-Chan could only return. The Hall of Spiritual Spells still had matters to attend to. After returning, Milia told Zi-Chan that most of the people had been recruited. All that was left was to wait for the spirit-breaking division to calculate the cost of resources. Zi-Chan sat in his office, a little worried. Right now, he really needed some people. Not only were they capable, but they also needed trust. However, there were too few trustworthy people here, and there were only a few with similar personalities as him. Worry. Suddenly, Zi-Chan felt a lingering fear. He clutched his chest, feeling extremely uncomfortable. This had never happened before, and Zi-Chan was at a loss for what to do. He suddenly fell to the ground and found it difficult to breathe. It was not because of his body. His body functions were normal. He felt as if he had forgotten something, and there was an empty feeling in his heart. Could it be that something happened to the Saint Spirit world? His expression changed, but there was nothing he could do, because even if something happened, he couldn't go back. Furthermore, the two of them were in two different worlds, so there shouldn't be such a reaction. Even if it was Su Mengyao, it was impossible for him to feel anything. It should be this world's problem. Then, Zi-Chan recalled what had happened after he came to this world. He guessed that something had happened to the mine. Zi-Chan immediately went to the Blackstone mine. Everything was normal. He then went to look for Marcus. Everything was normal. Finally, Zi-Chan went to look for Kant. Kant was leading some spell breakers to look for the mine. Other than finding nothing, everything was normal. Soul Mountain? Zi-Chan turned back again. This time, he didn't have any scruples and flew over. The Soul Mountain was normal. The old man even asked him how Xiaowei was. Walking out of the Soul Mountain, Zi-Chen's mood became very bad. Could something have happened to Xiaowei? He had just returned not long ago. Therefore, Zi-Chen quickly went outside the city. He first looked at the encampment. Everything was normal. Then he flew into the air and came to the vicinity of the mine. Miao Pengfei was still commanding the people. After seeing Zi-Chen, he was very surprised. After all, Zi-Chen had just left. Zi-Chen didn't say much. He saw Xiaowei 500 miles away. She was also fine. Zi-Chen turned back again. He went to the Kill Crystal Mine and saw Yuan Sha. At first glance, he asked, "Where's the killing spirit?" Yuan Sha said, "It's inside. Do you want to take it away?" Zi-Chen turned around and left, leaving Yuan Sha standing there stunned. Obviously, it wasn't the problem here. But why was his heart palpitating? And the palpitations had been going on until now. It was as if he had lost something he loved. But now there were many things that he cared about. He found Miao Pengfei. When the other party saw the depressed Zi-Chen, he asked him curiously what had happened. Zi-Chen told Miao Pengfei about the situation. Miao Pengfei said, "Are you thinking too much? Are you just feeling unwell?" Zi-Chen shook his head. At his level, he wouldn't feel unwell at all. And he could also feel that the palpitations had nothing to do with his heart. It was purely mental. It was the panic in his heart. Could it be our spellbreaker city? Miao Pengfei said after thinking. The two of them walked out of there together. But there was no one that Zi-Chen cared about there. Zi-Chen didn't even have any attachment to that place. Miao Pengfei said, "Actually, I've always wanted to go back and call them all over. After all, compared to that place, the probability of survival here is higher." Chin still didn't respond, but he thought of the old man, the blind man who fished the corpse. The moment he thought of that old man, Chen's mood fluctuated violently. It's there. Chin could almost conclude that the place that made his heart palpitate was where the old man was, which was the outermost part of this world. Could it be that something happened to the old man? Was that why he sensed it? But this possibility wasn't high, because the old man had an accident last time and almost disappeared. He still couldn't sense it, and the old man was just an ordinary one-strength realm cultivator. He didn't have such magical means. So what exactly was it that made him care? A thought suddenly flashed through Chen's mind. A thought that he didn't want to think about. Where had a person that he cared about appeared? The reason why he didn't dare to think about it was because this matter was too important. The people he cared about were all living well. Once they appeared here, it meant that the Saint Spirit world had changed. It meant that Hugh had unilaterally violated the original agreement. No, I have to go back. After sensing the source of the palpitations, Chin didn't stay any longer. He turned around and left. At this moment, he put everything down. He didn't care about the Orvain or the Black Stone. He flew back the way he came. On a high platform at the outermost part of this area, the old blind man started to reel in the net. Today he had fished up a crystal. He walked back with the net on his back. After so many years, he was still one strength realm cultivator. There was once a person named Chin who walked out of here and went to the depths. He never came back. No one knew if he was alive or dead. He put down the net and walked into the wooden house. At this moment, the crystal shone and then dissipated. A person appeared. It was a woman in white. She lay there quietly like a sleeping beauty. A mysterious light flickered around her body, like a layer of hazy veil, shrouding her graceful body. Suddenly she opened her eyes. There seemed to be another light in this world. She stood up and looked around. Is this the place? There was a light in her eyes. It was a mysterious light of deduction. Chapter 5150. A mysterious energy enveloped the woman's body, concealing her graceful figure. Her eyes glowed as she deduced this world. The mysterious energy around her quickly dissipated as she divined. Sounds came from inside the house as old Blindy walked out. He stopped at the door. His expression, which had not changed for a long time, underwent a drastic change at this moment. There was actually another person. This was the second person he had encountered who had awakened on their own in his career of collecting corpses. However, this woman in front of him seemed to be even more mysterious than Chin. Not only did she quickly adapt to this place, but she was also using some kind of technique. At this moment, standing here, the old man could already sense a unique aura coming from ahead. That aura was mysterious, ethereal, profound, and vast. In his perception, he seemed to have encountered the vast might of the heavenly Tao. At this moment, that aura disappeared and the woman's body swayed. The mysterious energy flowing around her body was quickly dimming. "Miss, you're too weak. Don't try again," the old man reminded her. At the same time, he kindly took out a strand of energy. "Quickly refine it, or you'll disappear. In this place, disappearing means death." The woman shook her head and rejected the old man's kindness. She once again activated the mysterious energy in her body. The old man's pupils constricted. He clearly had no eyes, but he seemed to see infinite light extending in front of him. Vaguely, he seemed to see countless rules flowing in front of him. It was like the dazzling Milky Way reappearing in front of him. It was so dazzling that he could not open his eyes. However, he had clearly lost his eyes long ago. The woman's body swayed again. This time, her aura was even weaker. She looked into the distance. "I believe that you're here." She activated the last strand of energy. A mysterious aura surged in this place. The mysterious energy protecting her body disappeared, and a beautiful face appeared. Her face was extremely pale. This was a sign of exhaustion. In this place, exhaustion meant death. However, in the face of death, the woman did not feel sad or despair. If you're not here, then there's no point in me living. In the face of a life and death crisis, she suddenly smiled. This smile seemed to cover the entire Milky Way. A speck of light appeared in her field of vision. The speck of light was rapidly approaching. Behind it were countless explosions. This was the sound of air explosions. Just as the woman was about to fall, the silhouette closed in and caught her in an instant. He looked at her in disbelief. She smiled and closed her eyes. The old man, standing at the back, was even more shocked. It was as if he had seen a god. After an unknown period of time, Su Mengyao, who felt infinite warmth, opened her eyes and saw a familiar face. Zi Qin. She whispered. Her beautiful face was filled with longing. He's awake. Zi Chen whispered softly, as if he was afraid that he would be too loud and disturb her. He held her in his arms and increased his strength slightly. He could clearly feel her existence. At this moment, the light shrouded Su Mengyao again, but she was only in the strength realm. The old man stood behind them. He had a lot of questions to ask, but Zi Qin only had eyes for this woman. He stood behind them and did not disturb them. He quietly watched as Zi Qin channeled energy into her, until the woman woke up, until the two embraced each other. After a long time, the two separated. He still didn't speak. Because the two of them seemed to have endless things to say, it was simply not his turn to speak. Why are you here? Where are the others? Zi Qin asked the biggest question in his heart. At the same time, his heart was in his throat. He was afraid. Everyone is fine. Su Mengyao knew what Zi Qin was worried about, so her first sentence put Zi Qin's heart at ease. After that, he was able to truly listen to Su Mengyao. 800 years after you left, Seuss changed his mind and wanted to annex the Saint Spirit world. The two seniors, Black and White, tried to stop him, but they failed. Zi Qin did not speak. He listened quietly, even though he was very anxious. As expected, the worst thing had happened. The Tianwu continent is the symbol of the Saint Spirit world. Our attitude was very important. After Seuss changed his mind, we compromised and announced that the entire Saint Spirit world would join Seuss's forces and become his subordinates. Despite our cooperation, we were still chased out of the Tianwu world. A group of people he trusted settled in the Tianwu world. So we found an unremarkable planet to live on and did our best to not contact the outside world. But Seuss was still worried about us. He couldn't personally act, so he secretly sent people to kill us. The two seniors had no choice but to send everyone to a mysterious place. But the two seniors knew that this was not a long-term matter. Once Seuss united the 10,000 worlds, he would no longer have to worry about us. At that time, he might personally attack us. They found out about Brady and told me where you might be heading. That's why I came to look for you. Brady was the lucky person who had managed to leave this place, but he had already been killed by Seuss. The fact that Su Mengyao had been able to find him could be said to be a great coincidence. After all, to be able to smoothly reach this place required a great deal of luck. As for him being able to sense Su Mengyao's existence, it was not purely luck. It was the connection between the two of them. Or it could be said that it was the bond between him and Su Mengyao. After understanding the whole story, Zi Qin shook his head. This place is like a danger zone. We can't go back for now, and we might never be able to. Su Mengyao said, Before I came, Miao Miao said that in times of danger, the Black Tower might be useful. Zi Qin shook his head again. He still could not sense the Black Tower's existence. Perhaps the Black Tower did not come here with him. After a while, Zi Qin turned around and looked at the old man. Senior, follow me to the depths. The old man looked at Zi Qin and asked in shock, There is actually the power to fly here. Yes, when you reach the 6th strength tier, you will have the power to fly. Zi Qin continued, There are more resources in the depths, and there are relatively fewer dangers. Then what about here? The old man asked. Not everyone will appear here, Zichen said. It doesn't matter if there are people here or not. There were too many people inside, and not everyone had entered from the outside. Zichen did not know the specific reason. He had not investigated it, but he believed that a place like this could not nurture so many people. For example, in the area controlled by Miao Pengfei, there were more than 10,000 people in the 1 strength tier and 2 strength tier. All right. The old man finally nodded in agreement. Before leaving, the old man left behind some energy in this wooden house. When the old man came out of the wooden house, the eyes that had disappeared appeared again, because he did not need to be a corpse fisherman anymore. He did not need to look directly at the vortex. Next, Zichen sent out a stream of energy. This stream of energy carried the old man and slowly rose into the sky. Zichen held Su Mingyao's hand and flew into the sky. Chapter 5151. In the sky, the old man was in front while Zichen and Su Mingyao were behind him. Zichen and Su Mingyao's hands were clasped together. The two of them looked at each other with happy smiles on their faces. Zichen had never been as happy as he was today after coming here. The old man felt that he was unnecessary and really wanted to go down, but he was only in the strength realm and would not be able to survive if he went down. Zichen seemed to sense the old man's awkwardness and began to explain some things to the two of them. Spiritual spellcasters, spellbreakers, killing crystals, martial crystals, spell-breaking beasts. The old man listened with great interest. It was an eye-opener. He had been here for countless years, but what he had seen was not even 1/10,000th of what Zichen had seen. Zichen went deeper and passed by the city that used to belong to Miao Pengfei. There were people below. He did not stop here and directly flew past. To him, there was nothing to be sentimental about here, and soon Miao Pengfei would come back and take them deeper. When the two of them learned that before the strength realm, they did not have a true body, they were extremely shocked. This place is indeed very mysterious. Su Mingyao sighed. It would be great if we could bring everyone here. Everyone here was in the same realm as the void realm in the outside world. It was very beneficial for cultivation. Unfortunately, there was no way out. If there was, it would be a good place. After the trial realm, they could come here directly. The level of this world was higher than that of the trial realm. When Zichen brought the two of them to the encampment and saw the people below, the old man was stunned. From what he knew, there should not be many people in this world. He did not expect there to be so many people. Su Mingyao was also very surprised. She was surprised by everyone's realms. They all had the void realm. Everyone here, even if they were only in the strength realm, could become a king when they went out. One must know that Brady was in the strength realm back then. He was lucky enough to go out and almost unify the 10,000 realms. Seeing Zichen's arrival, everyone in the encampment bowed to Zichen. Zichen nodded to them. Now there was another problem. Where should he go? Should he arrange for Su Mingyao to stay in the city first, or should he go to those mineral veins to see the progress? Su Mingyao saw Zichen's hesitation and said directly, "Let's go take a look at the mineral vein first. I can learn more about it and see if I can help." Yes, of course. Zichen smiled. He was very clear about Su Mingyao's ability. Right now, he had someone he could trust unconditionally, and that person was an almighty. As for the realm, there was no hurry. Zichen had plenty of resources. It would not be too late for Su Mingyao to break through the realm after she had familiarized herself with the place. Zichen left the old man here and arranged for Hu Zheng to take care of him. After that, he took Su Mingyao and flew towards the black stone vein outside. When Miao Pengfei saw Zichen, his eyes widened. He had never seen such an excited Zichen. He had gone out for a run and brought back a beauty. "Su Mingyao, my wife." Hearing Zichen's introduction, Miao Pengfei was shocked. "I say, Zichen, you're too amazing. How long have you been gone, and you've already found a wife?" He was really shocked. Zichen smiled. She's my wife. We've known each other for a long, long time. Yes, they had known each other since he was a teenager. Miao Pengfei was even more shocked. An old friend had come. It was far too difficult to meet an old friend here. Go ahead. I'll show her around. Zichen took Su Mengyao to the mountain peak. He pointed at the black stones and said, "These are soul stones. They're very useful to the Shadow Destroyer." On the way here, Zichen had told her about the Shadow Destroyer. He had nothing to hide from Su Mengyao. Su Mengyao walked up and picked up a black stone. She sensed it carefully. It's indeed soul power. Hearing this, Zichen was shocked. You can sense it. Su Mengyao said, "Why? Is there a problem?" Zichen said excitedly, "If you can sense it, it means you're also a shadow destroyer." Only a shadow destroyer could sense the magical use of the black stone. Otherwise, how could Zichen have tricked Michael and the others? Su Mengyao held the black stone and said, "I can't use the energy in it directly. I need to convert it." As she spoke, the black stone in her hand trembled. Then she drew out a strand of soul power. Seeing the soul power in Su Mengyao's hand, Zichen's eyes widened. Su Mengyao, who was only in the strength realm, actually had such means. Zichen would not believe that she was not a shadow destroyer. The soul power entered Su Mengyao's body. Su Mengyao closed her eyes and seemed to be sensing it carefully. Zichen did not disturb her. He just watched from the side. Right now, he was looking forward to it. After a while, Su Mengyao opened her eyes and said, "It's useful to me, but the power is indeed not very compatible." Suddenly, she looked into the distance and asked, "What are those?" Zichen followed Su Mengyao's gaze. He saw some buildings, and in front of those buildings were many shadow destroyers. "You can see them?" Zichen asked again, but soon he felt that this was nonsense. They seem a little strange. Their bodies are between reality and illusion. They can disappear at any time. Su Mengyao's words once again proved that she was extraordinary. Zichen could not help but admire her. Right at this moment, Xiaowei walked over from afar because she saw Zichen holding hands with a woman. The two of them seemed to be very intimate. Walking closer, she asked curiously, "Zichen, who is she?" "I'm his wife. I'm Su Mengyao." Su Mengyao answered for Zichen. This sentence startled Xiaowei. She immediately retreated and looked at Su Mengyao warily. She had been here for so long. Other than those shadow destroyers, no one could see her. But this weak human could not only see her, but also hear her words. "Don't be nervous. She's Su Mengyao. She's my wife." Zichen said, "Mengyao, she's Xiaowei. She brought me to the Soul Mountain. That's why I was able to take that step and reach the 6th power state." After turning around, the two turned back. Xiaowei looked at the two, leaving hand in hand. Her expression was very complicated. Zichen told him about the situation here and the difficulties he faced at the moment. Su Mengyao said, "Let those shadow destroyers follow. If anything happens, they can find out in advance." Zichen's eyes lit up. This was indeed a good idea. After all, no one else could see the shadow destroyers. Even if someone stole the black stone, as long as the shadow destroyers followed, nothing would go wrong. Zichen brought Su Mengyao back to Dharma Shattering City and walked towards the Hall of Spiritual Spells. At the same time, he told Su Mengyao that he would take over the 8 halls of spiritual spells. Chapter 51-52. When Lord Zichen left, he was alone. How long had he been gone? He actually came back with a woman. They even came back hand in hand. It seemed that they were very close. Many people were curious, and their eyes fell on Su Mengyao. There was no need to say much about her appearance. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was a celestial being, but her realm surprised everyone. She was only in the 1 strength realm. Would such an existence only appear outside of Pofa City? Why would such a lord find such a woman? Zi-Chen did not care about the people's gazes. He pulled Su Mengyao upstairs. When they arrived at Zi-Chen's office, Su Mengyao said, "You've been living here?" Zi-Chen said, "I lived here after reaching the 6th strength realm. I didn't live here before, but next we need to buy a house." Since Su Mengyao was here, it would be inconvenient for him to continue living here. Su Mengyao had no objection. There were too many people here. It was inconvenient to live here. Then Zi-Chen told Su Mengyao about the things he needed to do. Su Mengyao listened one by one. She did not interrupt. After Zi-Chen finished, Su Mengyao said, "Once the 8 halls of spiritual law are unified, everything will return to normal. As long as the price is reasonable, you don't need to waste energy on managing them. You only need to check the accounts regularly. And for better management, the 8 halls of spiritual law can collect things together and find a single person to manage them. You don't need to do everything in detail. You only need to supervise and make sure nothing goes wrong." Hearing Zi-Chen's words, Su Mengyao knew that the 8 halls of spiritual law were other people's businesses. She did not need to spend too much energy on them. Zi-Chen nodded and said the candidate is Milia. She should be able to do it. It's just that her realm is slightly lower. Su Mengyao asked, "Is her realm lower than mine?" Su Mengyao meant that her realm was not a problem, but this question made Zi-Chen speechless. If one's cultivation level was not considered, then Zi-Chen thought of another suitable candidate, Mi-Chi. When Big Beard treated him like that, he was still willing to protect Big Beard and used all his strength. It was enough to show that he was a good person. So Mi-Chi could be of great use. In addition, the old man who came here with the 2 of them also seemed to have a job. Zi-Chen expressed his thoughts. Su Mengyao said, "You are the foundation of everything. As long as you continue to be strong, the others will not matter. So, from now on, you must ensure that you are strong enough." This place was like the Saint Spirit domain. When Zi-Chen had absolute power, everything in the Saint Spirit domain was good. The gods, devils, and Yao had all been unified. However, with Brady's appearance, Zi-Chen's powerful combat strength was threatened. The Saint Spirit realm and the Tianwu world were in imminent danger. When it came to Theseus, he used his extremely high cultivation level to force Zi-Chen to leave. Ever since then, everyone in the Saint Spirit domain had been living in his shadow. This was even more so for the Tianwu world that Zi-Chen had single-handedly created. Even if they eventually compromised, they were still being hunted down. Zi-Chen said, "After I'm done with the matters here, I will start cultivating with all my strength and strive to break through as soon as possible." Even if Su Mengyao wanted to help Zi-Chen now, she had to familiarize herself with this place first. So, she was not in a hurry. When Zi-Chen and Su Mengyao went downstairs, the others were whispering. When they saw the 2 of them come down, they all shut their mouths. This was mainly because the Hall of Spiritual Law had recruited too many people recently. This was prepared in advance for the other 7 halls of spiritual law. So, everyone had the time to relax. "Maria." Zi-Chen looked at Maria. Maria walked over and glanced at Zi-Chen. Then, she sneaked a glance at Su Mengyao. She was really beautiful. As a woman, she was a little jealous. No wonder she could attract the Lord when she was only in the strength realm. Zi-Chen said, "You will be in charge of the Hall of Spiritual Law from now on. As for how many resources they need, you can see if it is reasonable. If it is reasonable, you will be in charge." Ah! Maria was stunned. She did not know how to react to this sudden appointment. Zi-Chen said again, "Also, after the handover, you will be in charge of the 8 halls of spiritual law. Then you will appoint 8 people as the deputy hall masters of each hall of spiritual law. From now on, the procurement and other management of the 8 halls of spiritual law will be under your command." Ah! Maria was stunned again. She seemed to have fainted from the sudden appointment. Zi-Chen did not repeat himself. He pulled Su Mengyao and left. After the two of them left, Maria was still stunned. She could not believe that this was real. Happiness came so quickly? Greetings, Lord. At this moment, there was an orderly voice from behind. Maria came back to her senses. Unknowingly, she started to cry. She thought that Lord Zichen would give her the position of Deputy Hall Master. After all, after Kant left, she was in charge of everything. The others also thought that it was natural. Maria only lacked an official appointment, but who would have thought that when this appointment came, it would actually be so big? Being in charge of the 8 halls of spiritual law was an existence comparable to a hall master. Most importantly, Maria had the power to appoint the other deputy hall masters. This identity was not ordinary. Next, Zichen began a series of appointments. For example, he let Mi-Chi take over the management of the Blackstone mine. The people that Marcus had originally arranged were to go to other places to look for new Blackstone mines. Hu Zheng continued to guard the station outside. Miao Pengfei and the old man went to the Blackstone mine outside and temporarily stood guard there. Xiao Wei was looking for other shadow destroyers, as well as keeping an eye out for possible mines. Duanai came out again to buy Blackstones. When he learned that Zichen wanted to buy a house, he waved his hand and gave his former house to Zichen. That was where he used to live. After he advanced to the 7th-strength state, he went there and never came out again. Zichen gladly accepted it. Because the two of them had an agreement, their interests were tied together. This house that had been empty for a long time finally welcomed a new owner. At the same time, there were more than 10 maids who were in the 3-strength state. When they saw that the mistress of the house was only in the 1-strength state, they were all very envious. They who were in the 3-strength state were working hard to survive. However, a family in the 1-strength state had such a big house. Su Mengyao had nothing to do recently, so she started to cultivate. No matter what, one's realm was the most important. No matter how extraordinary one's ability was, it still needed the support of one's realm. For Su Mengyao, everything was very simple. Zichen brought a sufficient amount of martial crystals. She only needed to refine them one by one. When the martial crystals were no longer useful, she would refine the martial crystal source. When the martial crystals were no longer useful, she would refine the internal elixir. When the Blackstone mine outside Pofa City started mining, Su Mingyao's realm had advanced to the 2-strength state. When the first batch of Blackstones was mined and ready to be transported to Pofa City, Su Mengyao had advanced to the 3-strength state. The maids in the house were very envious of their mistress's speed of advancement. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Chapter 51-53. How can there be an or vein in this shabby place? In the mountains, Phoebe was sitting on a large rock, grumbling in dissatisfaction. He had been wandering in this shabby mountain for a few months and found nothing. He did not even find an ordinary or vein, let alone a Blackstone or vein. Could it be that Zichen is deliberately messing with me? He suddenly thought of this problem and his expression changed. After all, we were so against him in the past. Thinking of this, Phoebe's expression became unsightly. He glanced into the distance and shouted, "Go and call those people over for me." There was no movement in the distance. Only his voice echoed in the mountains. "Die if you don't go." Phoebe's voice became cold. Recently, those people had been following him like flies. He had beaten them a few times, but after they ran away, they would soon follow him again. Fortunately, they were just following him and did not do anything else. Otherwise, he would have killed them. "Yes, I'm going now." A person in the distance responded and then quickly left. Not long after, his companions arrived, with Sang Lari at the front. Phoebe looked at them and said, "Where's Kant? Call that kid over too. I think something is wrong. Zichen might be deliberately tricking us." Soon Kant arrived. When he approached, he said with an expectant face, "Did you find something?" Phoebe said angrily, "Find my ass. Tell us the truth. Is Zi Qin deliberately targeting us this time?" "What do you mean?" Kant was puzzled. "Don't play dumb here. Is Zi Qin plotting against us? After all, we were so against him in the past, so he deliberately asked you to trick us?" The others also looked at Kant coldly. The reward mentioned by the other party was indeed tempting, but they had not found any Blackstone all this time. From the beginning until now, they had not seen any inner cores either. What they got from Zi Qin was only basic necessities. So now they felt that they had been tricked. Kant said, "What are you thinking? Lord Zi Qin is so busy. Where would he find the time to deal with you?" "Lord Zi Qin? The reason why he trusts you is because you betrayed us and gained his trust. But we are different. We are absolutely irreconcilable with him. Why should he believe us?" Phoebe questioned, "Tell me, did he deliberately ask you to make things difficult for us?" Kant said helplessly, "I say, you guys should wake up. All of you are merely in the 5-strength state. If Lord Zi Qin really wanted to deal with all of you, he could kill all of you with a flick of his finger. Why would he go through so much trouble?" He pointed at his feet and said, "That black stone is indeed very precious. That's why my lord asked you to come. If he was really playing with you, would he still give you a reward? That's easy for you to say. But where are we going to find Blackstone?" Phoebe was so angry that he stamped his foot on the ground. The ground under his feet instantly cracked, and a huge crack appeared. In that crack, a black light flashed. He was stunned and then looked at his feet in front of him. The black light was the black stone. When the others saw this scene, they all looked at each other in dismay. After months of searching, they did not find it. It appeared just like that. "Don't be impulsive." Kant suddenly lowered his voice and said, "Don't expose yourself. Whether this thing is Blackstone or not, we still need Lord Zi Qin to decide." He immediately reached out and dug out a few stones. "Don't expose yourself. I have to go back and ask my lord first." They were not stupid. If this really was a mine, then it would be terrible. "Nonsense, you said it's not a trap, so it's not a trap?" Phoebe suddenly became angry and said, "Go back and tell Zi Qin to explain this matter to us clearly. If he can't explain it clearly, we'll quit." Sanlali reacted quickly and immediately said, "That's right. If this matter is not explained clearly, we won't go anywhere. Lord Zi Qin is definitely not such a person." Kant cooperated and explained. His voice spread out. "You say it's not. We have to get an explanation today, or we'll be played like monkeys. Okay, don't be rash. I'll go ask my lord. Believe me, my lord is definitely not such a person." Kant quietly put away the black stone and started to turn back. He rose into the air and started to return to the city. When he saw the people below, he said angrily, "What's there to see? Get lost." Those people hurriedly distanced themselves, but they were all slandering him in their hearts. "You're a 6th-strength state, but you're being yelled at by a few 5th-strength states. Aren't you ashamed?" In Pofa City, there were always 2 sides to Zi Qin, the Shadow Destroyer. One was Dinny's faction, the conservative faction. They were in a state of allowing Zi Qin's development and did not deliberately interfere. On the other hand, the radical faction was Oliver's faction. They felt that Zi Qin, the Shadow Destroyer, did not deserve to live in this world, so they deliberately suppressed him. After Oliver returned, he thought of the loss he suffered at the hands of Zi Qin and was extremely unhappy. When he heard that the black stone needed for research was bought from Zi Qin for 2,000 streams of strength, he was even more unhappy. This stupid thing was only sold for 10 streams of strength. How could it be sold for 200 times more? Therefore, he volunteered and said that he could bring the black stone for free. Kant returned to Zi Qin's house and gave the black stone to Zi Qin. Zi Qin took the black stone and sensed it. The next moment, his eyes lit up. "It's a black stone. Who found it?" "Phoebe found it. They're guarding it now." Kant told him about the previous conflict without hiding anything. "You're quite lucky. Come, let's go now." Zi-Chin and Kant walked outside. The two did not drink the water Su Mengyao had just poured for them. Zi-Chan smiled apologetically and quickly left the city. Not long after Zi-Chin left, a loud sound suddenly came from outside. The door of the house collapsed. The maids all walked out of their rooms and looked at the door. A group of people swaggered in. There were two people in the lead. One of them was Oliver, and the other was the radical faction he had brought out from inside. Michael and the others followed behind the two of them. Big Beard was among them. "This is Zi-Chen's house." Oliver looked around and said disdainfully, "He really knows how to enjoy himself. Who are you people?" Su Mengyao walked out of the room and looked at these uninvited guests. When they saw Su Mengyao, their eyes lit up. Clearly, they did not expect such a beauty to be in this house. Oliver glanced at Su Mengyao. "Who do you think you are? How dare you talk to me?" "I'm Zi-Chen's wife," Su Mengyao said. Oliver said disdainfully, "Zi-Chen must be blind. He's a Six Forces state cultivator. How could he find someone like you? Where's Zi-Chen? Ask him to come out." Su Mengyao said he went out. "Went out? I think he ran away in fright." Oliver swept the surroundings with his gaze and said, "Since he isn't here, then I'll spare his dog life for now. As for a bitch like you, don't you know how to call me Lord?" Swish, swish. Two rays of light suddenly flew out from Oliver's side and swept past Su Mengyao's body. Puff, puff. Su Mengyao's arms were cut off. After falling to the ground, they turned into energy and disappeared. Such a scene was out of everyone's expectations. The maids in the distance exclaimed. Su Mengyao's face turned pale when her arms were cut off. However, she did not exclaim. She just looked at the wound calmly. Just as Zi-Chin said there was no blood. "Pass a message to Zi-Chin for me. Prepare the Blackstone. I'll come and get it in a few days. Remember, it's free." Oliver said indifferently, "This is just a lesson. If he dares to bargain with us, we'll take his life." Chapter 51-54. Kant brought Zi-Chin out of Pofa City and came to the mountains. As they approached, Zi-Chin saw that there were other spirit casters nearby. However, they were far away from Phoebe and the others and didn't dare to get too close. The two of them landed, and Phoebe pointed at the crack that was slightly covered and said, "It's there." Zi-Chin walked forward and waved his hand. Energy swept up the cover, and he saw many crystals. These were all black stones, but Zi-Chin still needed to check how many there were. He released his soul power and carefully sensed the surroundings. However, he could only sense the surface and couldn't sense the depths. Phoebe and the others were still very nervous at this moment because the conflict between them and Zi-Chin wasn't small. Usually, they were very loud and clamorous about how they couldn't live under the same sky with Zi-Chin. However, when Zi-Chin really appeared in front of them, they were all terrified. Fortunately, when Zi-Chin came, his attention fell on the Blackstones, and he didn't argue with them. This made them slightly relieved. Zi-Chin retracted his soul power and looked at the few of them. He said, "Two of you go and chase everyone away. The rest of you dig around nearby." As he spoke, Zi-Chin took out a contract and wrote his name on it without hesitation. At the same time, it covered the mountains with a radius of 1,000 miles with Zi-Chin as the center. At this point, this place became Zi-Chin's private property. Just by sensing, there were many black stones, and it was worth it to use one chance. The few of them spread out. Some went to dig deeper, and some went to chase people away. Zi-Chin also walked around and looked around. Occasionally, he would dig into the ground. There were more black stones here than he imagined. As long as he stomped his feet, as long as the ground cracked, he would be able to see some of the black stones contained inside. This might be because no one had mined the black stones for many years, causing their numbers to increase. After a moment, the few of them walked back, and almost all of them found something. Zi-Chin looked at them and asked, "Who discovered this place?" Everyone looked at Phoebe, but Phoebe was a little embarrassed. He had only landed a foot on the ground. He was really lucky. Speaking of which, it was because he felt that he had been tricked by Zichen that he kicked out in anger. Zichen continued. From the looks of it, the area of the mine is not small. According to the original plan, I should give you an inner core as a reward, but now I've changed my mind. Phoebe's expression suddenly changed. The others were the same. Were they going to change their minds? Kongda, on the other hand, was very calm. He did not believe that Zichen would let them suffer. Zichen continued, I plan to give each of you a Naiden as a reward. As soon as these words came out, their eyes lit up and they looked at Zichen in disbelief. One had to know that each Naiden was worth a lot. Was Zichen really willing to give one to each of them? In addition, after the mine is officially mined, if the value is high, I will give you an extra 10% reward. Zichen said, It's 10% for all of you combined, not 10% for all of you. This was amazing. One had to know that each piece of blackstone was worth as much as 2,000 streams of power. Giving them a portion of the entire mine was definitely a good reward. For a moment, they could not believe that this was actually true. There was enmity between the two sides. Why would he give them such good treatment? Looking at their expressions of disbelief, Zichen said again, Don't be happy too early. Next, you need to protect this mine and not let others occupy it. If it's occupied by others, you won't get anything. This is what we should do. Phoebe immediately said, Don't worry, we'll kill anyone who dares to steal it. Then Zichen looked at Kant and said, Go and find Marcus. Next, let him arrange for people to start mining here. Kant nodded. Marcus already had experience in this aspect. After Zichen arranged everything here, he returned to his residence. Today he was in a good mood. Roughly estimating, the range of the mine was close to 100 miles. If he continued to dig, there might be more surprises. In this way, he would have 3 Blackstone mines. Of course, Duanai also had a share of this Blackstone mine. As for how much he had, it would be decided when the two of them met. Arriving at the mansion, Zichen looked at the door and his expression changed. The door seemed to have been destroyed by force. Although it was repaired, there were still traces of it. He entered the mansion in a flash. Everything looked normal. There were no abnormalities. Zichen quickly came to the living room and called out to Meng Yao. Su Mengyao walked out of the room. You're back? How was the harvest? My luck was not bad. I found a mine. When Zichen spoke, he was also sizing up Su Mengyao. However, he did not see any other emotions from her face. Congratulations. Su Mengyao smiled. Someone came? Since he could not tell, he took the initiative to ask. Su Mengyao nodded. Some people came and said they were looking for you. They came and destroyed the door. I think they came with bad intentions. I said you weren't here and they left. They might come again next time. They should be here for the Blackstone. Since Du and I came out last time, no one dared to go against Zichen, because even the Hall of Spiritual Magic was under Zichen's control. Who dared to come and kick the door? Michael and the others definitely did not dare. They did not have the guts. Could it be Oliver? He came out to look for trouble again? Zichen's expression turned ugly. He asked, He didn't make things difficult for you, right? No. After knowing you weren't here, they left. Zichen nodded, and only then did he feel at ease. As long as they did not make things difficult for Su Mengyao, it was fine. Otherwise, Zichen would definitely not let him go. Now, he just had to wait for the other party to come again. You continue to cultivate. I'll go to the Hall of Spiritual Magic to take a look. After Zichen finished speaking, he turned and left. After walking out of the hall, Zichen looked around. Usually there were maids here. Today there was no one. He turned his head and looked around. In the corner he saw a maid. However, after their eyes met, the man quickly averted his gaze and left. This was obviously not normal. Zi-chun looked at the door again. A haze flashed in his heart. He directly walked out of the mansion. After seeing Zi-chun leave, the maids who were hiding in the dark heaved a sigh of relief. One by one, they started to get busy again. When one of them turned around, he almost cried out in surprise. The Lord who just left appeared in front of her. Zi-chun made a shushing gesture at her. "My Lord." The maid's face was pale. She looked at Zi-chun with some fear. Zi-chun said, "Tell me what happened here." The maid shook her head. How would she dare to say? To be honest, they had always thought that the mistress of the mansion was only beautiful and lucky to be favored by the Lord. However, today when her arms were cut off, her expression did not change at all. At that moment they were all shocked. She did not scream or cry. After those people left, the mistress called them over. Ignoring her missing arms, the first thing she said was, "Don't tell Zi-chun about this." At that moment, they were full of admiration. If it were them, they would have been scared out of their wits. Facing Zi-chun's gradually sharp eyes, the maid could not resist the pressure. She told Zi-chun what happened in full detail. After knowing that Su Mingyao's arms were cut off, Zi-chun's pupils shrank. In the maid's imagination, Lord Zi-chun would fly into a rage. However, it did not happen. After listening quietly, Zi-chun said, "Don't worry, I'll keep it a secret for you." After saying that, Zi-chun disappeared. He originally wanted to go to the Hall of Spiritual Magic, but now he changed his mind. Chapter 51-55. Zi-chun left Pofa City and went straight out of the city. Along the way, Zi-chun's expression was very calm, but this calmness was no doubt terrifying. When he arrived at the Killing Crystal lode, it was already late at night. Zi-chun walked into the lode and shouted, "Yuan Sha!" His voice echoed in the underground mine. Soon, a light shadow appeared. Yuan Sha stood in front of Zi-chun. Seeing Yuan Sha, Zi-chun said directly, "I want the slaughter spirit back." Yuan Sha didn't ask Zi-chun the reason. The slaughter spirit turned into a stream of light and flew toward Zi-chun. During this time, it had refined the killing intent, so its aura had become sharper, and its killing intent had become stronger. After the slaughter spirit circled around Zi-chun once, it disappeared from his side. Zi-chun cupped his fists at Yuan Sha to show his gratitude. Then he turned around and left. Looking at Zi-chun's back, Yuan Sha suddenly asked, "When will you come back?" Zi-chun said without turning his head, "If it goes well, soon. If it doesn't, I won't come back." Yuan Sha watched Zi-chun leave. He naturally understood what Zi-chun meant. If it didn't go well, it meant that he would die in battle. At this time, if he came to ask for a weapon, he would have to fight. After leaving the lode, Zi-chun soared into the sky and continued the way he came. When he saw Pofa City, the sky was already bright. After entering the city, Zi-chun suddenly stopped. A person stood in front of him. It was Su Mingyao. "Why are you here?" Zi-chun looked at Su Mingyao in surprise. Su Mingyao didn't answer Zi-chun's question. Instead, she said directly, "This time you were too impulsive." When Zi-chun came back, he told Su Mingyao almost everything he could say. During this time, he naturally told her about the slaughter spirit. So when Zi-chun left the city, she guessed what Zi-chun's purpose was. Zi-chun said, "I know what I'm doing." Su Mingyao shook her head and said, "You don't know. This time, you and I should feel lucky instead of seeking revenge." Zi-chun nodded and said, "I know. I thought about it the whole night on the road. I'm really glad that nothing happened to you, but I feel that a person's luck can't always be good. In order to prevent this kind of thing from happening in the future, I have to remove all threats." "How do I remove it?" Su Mingyao asked. "Kill him? If one was killed, there would be a second. You've forgotten about your assets, your mineral veins. If you continue to be so impulsive, you'll lose everything." Zi-chun smiled and looked at Su Mingyao. Do you know why I've been working so hard to cultivate all these years? Before Su Mengyao could respond, Zichen said, because I know that only with great power can I protect you. If I can't even protect the people I love, then what's the use of my power? He reached out and hugged Su Mengyao in his arms. Wait for me in the mansion. Don't worry, I won't be impulsive. Once there's danger, I'll run. At that time, the two of us will escape into the mountains and live there from now on, never to come out. Zichen hugged Su Mengyao tightly. No need to persuade me. I've made up my mind. For you, I'm willing to give up everything. But no buts. Trust me. Zichen let go of Su Mengyao and strode forward. At this moment, the sun was so bright that it was dazzling. Before he reached the place, he saw Oliver and dozens of people. Other than Oliver, there was also a man who looked sinister. Oh, isn't this Zichen? Oliver saw Zichen and smiled. You're here so early? You're quite obedient. It seems that you've remembered the lesson I taught you yesterday. The others followed and laughed. Oliver hooked his finger at Zichen and said, Get over here. I'm sure that bitch has already told you. Then I'll repeat it again. From now on, all the black stones you mine will be given to us for free. Remember, it's for free. After you're done mining, give it to Michael. He'll naturally hand it over to us. Michael immediately said, That's right. Just give it to me directly from now on. Zichen said, What if I don't? Oliver's face turned cold. He said coldly, It seems that yesterday's lesson wasn't enough. Yesterday I was merciful and only chopped off that bitch's arms. It seems that I'll have to cut off her head next time. You're so fearless because you think she's fine, right? I just don't know if she can regrow her head without it. Zichen said, Actually, I'm here today for this matter. Oliver laughed. That's right. Since you've chosen to be a dog, you should act like one. Bring all the black stones over. Remember, hand them over with both hands. Zichen smiled and walked forward. Oliver said disdainfully, See, that's how it should be. He'll remember it the first time. He's smiling so happily even though he's a dog. Zichen walked closer and took out a bone staff. He smashed it forward. Without hesitation, You're courting death, Oliver shouted. He clearly did not expect this guy to dare to attack him. His 7 strengths realm aura was fully unleashed as he struck forward with his palm. Zichen's descending bone staff's aura also surged in an instant. It smashed down even more fiercely. Bam! Their attacks met. Powerful energy surged wildly as both of them retreated. Seeing this, the others retreated far away. They all looked ahead in fear. This Zichen was really bold. He actually dared to make a move just like that. Zichen gripped the bone staff tightly and stared coldly at Oliver. Only by killing you can this matter be resolved. After saying that, he tapped his foot and his body instantly swept forward. The aura of a shadow destroyer was fully unleashed. Infinite golden light flowed on the bone staff. The already terrifying bone staff seemed to have been upgraded to another level. Bam! It smashed down forcefully. Oliver's arm instantly collapsed, and he quickly retreated. Gavin, this guy is crazy. Let's kill him together, Oliver shouted as he retreated. The other 7 strengths realm cultivator said coldly, This Shattering Law City is a place of rules. Since you broke the rules and started a fight here, don't blame me for being merciless. Zichen said disdainfully, Now you're talking about rules. Why didn't you do so yesterday? The two of you go ahead. Don't think I don't know that Oliver is a coward. If he was alone, he wouldn't have dared to come out. Good. Oliver's face was full of anger. What an ungrateful guy. Today is the day you die. Powerful energy surged out from his body like countless strong winds, forming a cutting force around him. He was the first one to come with a strong wind. Zichen was not to be outdone. The aura of the bone staff suddenly changed. Some intertwining lights appeared on it. It was the destruction rules that Zi Chen had comprehended. The moment these rules met the wind blade, they immediately disintegrated it. As the name suggested, it was destruction. Bam! Chapter 51-56. Just as Zi Chen sent Oliver flying, Gavin attacked from behind. He held a long sword in his hand and slashed down. The sword was extremely sharp and shone with a cold light. Zi Chen blocked with his bone staff. Boom! A powerful energy shockwave forced Zi Chen to take a few steps back. His arm was a little numb. His opponent was not having a good time either. He staggered back. Gavin looked at his opponent's bones, and then at the sword in his hand. He was clearly shocked that his sword had not been able to cut through his broken bone staff. Swoosh! Oliver's attack came again. At this moment, 2 7th-strength realm cultivators joined forces to deal with Zi Chen. The others were watching from afar. Their faces were filled with anticipation as they watched the battle. As long as Zi Chen died, everything he had would become theirs. The mineral veins, the hall of spiritual spells, and other resources. Even that woman from yesterday. Oliver did not like that woman, but they did. It was rare to see such a beauty in their lives. The energy was still roaring, forming powerful shockwaves. Zi Chen was not at a disadvantage, even though he was fighting 2 people alone. But he could not defeat the 2 of them. You're just SOO. Gavin's eyes were cold. A hint of disdain appeared at the corner of his mouth. Didn't they say that shadow destroyers are invincible? Where is your invincibility? After that, his sword slashed down again. The sword light was sharp and powerful. Zi Chen did not respond. He only attacked fiercely. The long sword and the bone staff kept colliding, creating a terrifying aura. The people in the distance retreated again, worried that they would be affected. Just the energy shockwaves alone were not something they could withstand. After many collisions, Zi Chen realized that the power of the bone staff, which had always been successful, seemed to be decreasing. This change made his expression change. The bone staff had never disappointed him before. Why was it like this now? After retreating after one clash, Zi Chen took a closer look at the bone staff. His expression changed immediately. There were many cracks on the bone staff. Was it going to break? He was clearly in disbelief. One had to understand that this weapon came from a powerful, strange beast. After so many years of killing intent, its entire body had rotted away, leaving behind only a bone staff. All this time, the bone stick had always been successful. Bang! Gavin's attack came again, and Zi Chen could only block. Although he was very careful, the bone staff still scattered. The bone staff was completely destroyed. This skeleton that had existed for who knew how many years had finally come to an end. Cheers came from all around. It was obvious that without the bone staff, Zi Chen's combat strength would be greatly reduced, and he would die without a doubt. Die. While Zi Chen was in a daze, Gavin rushed forward and stabbed his sword into Zi Chen's chest. Pooh! It completely entered his body, piercing through his chest. Facing this sword, Zi Chen suddenly smiled coldly. He reached out with both hands and firmly grasped his opponent's arm. Gavin tried to break free, but to no avail. Buzz! The next moment, a ray of light appeared and headed straight for Gavin, who was close at hand. The distance between them was so close that he couldn't react in time. Pooh! The ray of light directly pierced through Gavin's forehead. Boundless killing intent gushed out. Everyone felt a chill and couldn't help but shiver. By the time they reacted, Gavin had already collapsed. There was no sign of life. He was dead. The situation of the battle had changed too quickly. Just a moment ago, everyone was still cheering because Zi Chen had lost his weapon and his combat strength was greatly reduced. The next moment, Gavin was killed. When Oliver saw this scene from behind, he didn't take advantage of Gavin's death and Zi Chen's injury to attack. Instead, he turned and fled in horror. Swoosh! A cold light flashed as the spirit of massacre charged directly at Oliver. That terrifying killing intent made his heart tremble. His body changed direction in midair, and with a poof, an arm flew high into the air with blood splattering everywhere. Zi-Chin, you dare to kill people in the city. You're finished. Ignoring the pain of losing his arm, Oliver screamed and deliberately let his voice spread far and wide. At this moment, Gavin's long sword was still stuck in Zi-Chen's chest. He didn't pull out his sword and directly charged forward. His Shadow Destroyer aura was fully activated as he followed Oliver. Pooh! Blood flashed again, and one of Oliver's legs was gone. He lost his balance and fell to the ground. After the spirit of massacre devoured Yuan Sha's killing intent, its power was undoubtedly stronger. You don't come over. Oliver, who had fallen to the ground, turned around and looked at Zi-Chen in horror. Killing people is against the law. Do you want to die? This is Dharma-shattering city. We have our own rules. Zi-Chen's eyes were cold. I can only live if I kill you. After saying that, Zi-Chen directly pulled out Gavin's sword from his chest. He held the long sword in his hand and slashed at Oliver in front of him. Seeing that Zi-Chen wasn't going to hold back, Oliver put on a desperate expression. Zi-Chen, you asked for it. If you want to die, let's die together. He charged forward crazily, fully activating his 7th strength state aura. Pooh! Just then, the spirit of massacre appeared again. Its attack was like a ghost as it passed through Oliver's temple. At the same time, Zi-Chin slashed with the long sword in his hand, and Oliver was cut in half at the waist. His body was split into 2. After falling to the ground, there was no sign of life. Everyone else was shocked. Clearly, they didn't expect Zi-Chin to be able to kill 2 people in a 1 versus 2 situation. Pooh! Just as they were stunned, the spirit of massacre appeared again and swept past Michael's body. Everyone else was scared out of their wits and turned to run. Clearly, Zi-Chin didn't care anymore and was going to kill everyone. Pooh! The light flashed again and Big Beard fell. He hadn't reached the 6th strength state yet. When his body fell to the ground, it disappeared. Before he died, his eyes were full of regret. He had heard that Mitch had become the person in charge of the Blackstone mine. If he hadn't played tricks back then, he would probably be the one in charge now. At this moment, Zi-Chin seemed to have no qualms about killing people at will. Those who had followed Oliver here were all scared away. After the last person ran away, Zi-Chin staggered and fell to the ground. He had to use his long sword to support himself on the ground to stand up. A fatal blow from a 7th strength state cultivator was very terrifying. If Oliver had the courage to fight to the death with him, it was hard to say who would have been the one to die. Zi-Chin! Just then, Su Mengyao appeared. She quickly came to Zi-Chin and supported Zi-Chin, who was barely standing. Zi-Chin smiled. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. I'm fine. Take their things, and let's get out of here. You still care about those external things at this time? They're not external things. They came from inside, so they have good things on them. Seeing Zi-Chen's insistence, Su Mengyao could only go forward and take their rings. As for Michael's ring, Zi-Chen didn't let Su Mengyao take it. Michael had been tricked by him, so he probably didn't have many resources inside. Su Mengyao supported Zi-Chin and walked into the mansion. Everywhere they passed, existences came out one after another and silently looked at the 2 of them. Even though Zi-Chan was seriously injured and seemed to be in danger, no one dared to attack him. When the 2 returned to the mansion, the maids' expressions changed when they saw Zi-Chin. They didn't know what had happened. After returning to his room, Zi-Chan began to treat his wounds. The news about him spread quickly in Pofa City. When the maids went out to buy things, they were all shocked when they heard that he had disappeared. Zi-Chin, a 6th strength state cultivator, had killed 2 7th strength state cultivators? At this moment, other than shock, they were deeply envious. Chapter 51-57. Zi-chan returned to recuperate. He had lost his bone staff in this battle. This special weapon that had been with him for a long time had disappeared, just like that. However, he had also obtained Gavin's long sword, which could make the bone staff disappear. It was also of good quality. In Pofa City, there were more and more discussions about Zi-chan. Everything was about him. When Kant, Marcus, and the others heard the news, they knew that things were not going well. Unlike before, Zi-chan had killed the people inside this time. To them, those people were really important people. All the rules outside were set by the people inside. This included the power to set the price of everything. This time it was really troublesome. Kant rushed back in time. When he saw Zi-chan was still recuperating. He wanted to say that Zi-chan was too impulsive this time, but when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he gave up. He only said some things about the new mineral vein. Zi-chan guessed why he had come. He smiled and said, "I wasn't impulsive. On the contrary, I've never been so rational before. You, on the other hand, have never met such a person. Naturally, you can't understand how I feel." Kant didn't understand. This was normal. Zi-chan and Su Mingyao met when Zi-chan was at his weakest. At that time, Su Mingyao's only senior, the Supreme Elder, had entrusted Su Mingyao to him. From then on, their fates were closely linked. "Don't worry about me. Everything will go on as usual. Even if something happens to me, don't stop your work." The same goes for them. When the time comes, Du and I will arrange everything. Zi-chan smiled and said, "Or when I die, Du and I will take over." Kant's expression suddenly changed. Zi-chan said, "Don't think too much. He won't do such a thing." Kant left, and Zi-chan continued to sit cross-legged and cultivate. His heart began to beat faster, and energy began to surge out of it. This feeling was something that he hadn't felt in a long time. Zi-chan's eyes lit up. Every time an abnormality occurred, there was an opportunity to break through. Could it be the same this time? At the same time, the soul power in his mind started to resonate. At the very center of his soul, the pitch-black, abyss-like part of his soul started to be reflected by his soul power. His soul power also began to strengthen. Zi-chan was also looking forward to breaking through to the next realm. On the fourth day, Du and I came out. He didn't go to the Hall of Spiritual Spells. Instead, he went straight to Zi-chan's residence. When he saw Zi-chan for the first time, his expression was very ugly. After Su Mingyao poured water for him, he even forgot to thank her. This time it's really troublesome. Zi-chan didn't say anything and just listened quietly. I remember telling you before that there are currently two factions in this situation. We belong to the faction that will allow you to develop. Du and I said, "As for the others, they are the kind that want you dead." Zi-chan nodded. Back then, Du and I had said that the most typical representative was Oliver, who he had already killed. I forgot to tell you last time. There's another type of people. Their attitude was ambiguous before, but now they don't want you to live. Du and I said in a deep voice, "They are the Shadow Destroyers." Hearing the words Shadow Destroyers, Zi-chan first thought of those people in the Soul Mountain. But it was clear that Du and I didn't know of their existence. And if those people really wanted him dead, they wouldn't have led him to the Soul Mountain back then. Shadow Destroyers? Zi-chan said, "Are they the Shadow Destroyers who are known to have the most noble status?" When he first entered Dharma-shattering city, Zi-chan knew that spiritual spellcasters had low status. Dharma-shatterers had high status, and above them there was a type of Shadow Destroyer with the highest status. But Zi-chan, who knew the truth, also knew that there were no Shadow Destroyers in this world. All the Shadow Destroyers had been exterminated. Yes, Shadow Destroyers, Du and I said, but they're different from those before. They're acquired Shadow Destroyers. Shadow Destroyers are divided into innate and acquired. Zi-chan looked at Du and I in confusion. There weren't in the past, but they appeared not long ago. Du and I looked at Zichen. To be precise, after you appeared, some acquired shadow destroyers appeared one after another. How did they appear? Zichen was very interested in this because it concerned the situation of the shadow destroyers in the Soul Mountain. Du and I said with a serious expression, they appeared after plundering the souls of the shadow destroyers. Zichen's expression changed greatly when he heard this. Boom! Just then, there was a huge tremor from the main door of the mansion, and the door exploded. Zichen and Du and I walked out of the room and saw 3 people at the door. The door, which had just been repaired not long ago, was completely shattered. Who are you? Zichen stared at the 3 uninvited guests. The leader of the 3 looked at Du and I and said coldly, "Who let you out?" Du and I immediately saluted him and said, "I'm here to talk to Zichen. After all, he's in charge of the Hall of Spiritual Techniques outside." "No need for that now. Arrange for someone else." It was a burly man with a beard. He waved his hand at Du and I and said, "Get out of my way." Du and I retreated to the side, but did not dare to show any displeasure. The burly man stared at Zichen and said, "Come here and kneel." Zichen looked at him with coldness in his eyes. Du and I was afraid of him, but he was not. And if his perception was not wrong, the other party was only in the 6th-strength state. He had even killed a 7th-strength state, let alone a 6th-strength state. Seeing Zichen standing there without moving, the burly man's eyes turned colder. "I told you to get out of my way and kneel. Didn't you hear me?" "Why?" Zichen asked. "Why? You dog, how dare you ask me that?" The burly man smiled coldly. "Now, I'll show you what I'm relying on." He looked at the person next to him. There were a total of 6 streams of light flowing around the other party. This meant that he was also in the 6th-strength state, but after releasing his aura, he became a 6th-strength state shadow destroyer. Zichen's pupils shrank, as expected, but what shocked him even more was that in the next moment, the other party's body disappeared into thin air. Zichen did not know where he went. Suddenly, there was a scream in the room. When Zichen reacted, a person had already broken through the window. It was Su Mengyao. The person who had just disappeared was grabbing her hair and dragging her out of the room. Su Mengyao had been staying in the room. Even when there was a huge commotion outside, she did not join in the fun. She did not want to cause trouble for Zichen. Unexpectedly, someone still broke in and caught her. Oliver and Gavin's deaths should be because of her, right? The burly man looked at Su Mengyao with a strange look in his eyes. "She's indeed a beauty. It's rare to see one here." Zichen immediately said, "This has nothing to do with her." The burly man glanced at Zichen. "If you want her to live, kneel. Otherwise, you know the consequences." Su Mengyao struggled to shake her head, but Zichen had already knelt without hesitation. Thump! Chapter 51-58. Zichen knelt on the ground without hesitation. His knees hit the ground with a thud. "No," Su Mengyao exclaimed. She wanted to struggle, but her captor lifted her by the hair and slapped her twice. Zichen, who was still kneeling on the ground, said, "This is between you and me. It has nothing to do with her. Let her go." The maidservants who were standing in the distance were moved by this scene. "I thought you were someone, but I didn't expect you to be so spineless." Seeing this, the burly man's expression became even more disdainful. "We were right to come out this time. You don't have the right to live in this world. Shadow Destroyer, do you think you're worthy?" Zichen said again, "Let her go. If you have anything to say, come at me." At the same time, Zichen looked at Su Mengyao and used his eyes to signal her not to struggle. Right now, she was too weak to withstand the opponent's attack. The most important thing was to stay alive. As long as she was alive, she would have everything. Su Mengyao cried. She did not expect that instead of being Zichen's help, she would become his burden. Swoosh! The burly man's figure disappeared. The next moment, a force landed on his cheek. Chen, who was kneeling on the ground, was sent flying. He still did not see the person who attacked. The burly man who disappeared appeared again. He looked at Chen with an increasingly disdainful expression. You haven't even comprehended the shadow rule. Do you deserve to live? Chen did not know what the shadow rule was, and he was not in the mood to ask. He only hoped that Su Mengyao would not be hurt. After all, she was only at the 3rd strength realm. She could not withstand an attack from the enemy. At this moment, Chen felt regret. If he knew there would be such a crisis, he would not have brought Su Mengyao to the city and let her suffer such grievances. He blamed himself. Seeing Chen like this, the burly man became even angrier. Oliver was killed by such a weakling. He stepped forward again. Without using any rule, he kicked Chen's head. He kicked Chen to the ground again. Denny stood not far away. His spirit was somewhat dispirited. He had the heart, but was powerless. The Shadow Destroyer was indeed a very special existence here. Even he could not control them. This was because when these people plundered the Shadow Destroyer's soul, they also inherited the law that the Shadow Destroyer had mastered. It was said to be the unique shadow law of this world and was extremely powerful. Even if Chen was at the 7th force state, he would be helpless against the 3 of them, let alone the fact that he was only at the 6th force state. Even he was afraid of that shadow technique. The brawny man stepped forward and kicked Chen again, sending him flying into the distance. Trash like you, even I feel ashamed for you. Seeing that Chen did not fight back, the brawny man stepped forward and began to punch Chen again and again. Chen, fight back or you'll die. Su Mingyao's voice comes from not far away. She is slapped again. Let her go. Chen said in a deep voice, Your target is only me. It has nothing to do with her. Chen was very clear about Su Mingyao's intention. If he died, she would not be able to live. Therefore, no matter what happened, Chen had to survive. Chen knew this, but Chen did not dare to risk it, because as long as the other party had the intention to kill, Su Mengyao would die. He would only be punched and kicked a few times. He would not die. Your life is in my hands. What right do you have to bargain with me? The brawny man kicked again, and Chen's body slid back. Edwin, this has nothing to do with anyone else. Denny saw this and also spoke up. However, after Edwin glanced at him coldly, he did not dare to say anything. Chen, who had fallen to the ground, got up and said coldly, If she didn't threaten me, do you think I would let you kill me? Don't say that I looked down on you. You looked down on yourselves first. What did you say? The brawny man was angry. You mean we're afraid of you? That's why we're here to threaten you. What else could it be? Chen said, You have the nerve to deal with a 3-strength realm cultivator? Oliver was like this before, and now you're talking big. But what happened in the end? If you really have the ability, come at me directly. Let's see if I can kill you 3 idiots. Using a 3-strength realm cultivator to threaten me? That's all you can do. If I say that I look down on you, you'll be honored, right? Because that's the truth. Chen's provocation was obviously a gamble. He bet that the other party was a conceited person. All right. Then I'll let you, an arrogant guy, see the true power of a shadow destroyer. Edwin felt greatly insulted by Chen's contempt. He said coldly, Let her go and teach this guy a lesson. The 6th-strength realm cultivator who had grabbed Su Mengyao flung her away. Then, the other party's figure flashed and disappeared. Chen still could not see the other party. He could not even sense the other party's aura. The other party was like a cloud of air, dissipating just like that. In the next instant, danger approached. Chen immediately dodged, but there was still an attack that brushed past his shoulder. Chen took a few steps back. There was fear in his eyes as he said, We're all shadow destroyers. What kind of technique is this? He glanced out of the corner of his eye. Su Mengyao was fine and had already retreated to the back. This calmed him down, and he pretended to be shocked. "What technique?" Edwin said disdainfully. "You don't even know the shadow maxim. What kind of shadow destroyer are you?" Zichen asked again, "What's the shadow maxim?" He really did not know. What answered him was an illusory attack that landed on him one after another. Zichen was knocked to the ground again. He still could not see the other party. It was like a strange invisibility technique. Zichen was pondering the other party's words in his mind. "Shadow maxim, you're courting death." While thinking, he roared angrily. His palm touched the ground, and he instantly flew backward. "Idiot!" Edwin sneered when he saw this. Before Zichen could stabilize his body, an attack landed on his abdomen and hit hard. Bang! Zichen flew backward again and crashed on the stone steps in front of the residence. Blood immediately flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Then the attacks continued like raindrops. He still could not see the two people who attacked him. "Chop off his limbs first," Edwin ordered again when he saw this from afar. At this moment, there were suddenly two popping sounds. Originally, there was nothing in front of Zichen, but as the light flashed past, two people appeared. They widened their eyes and looked at Zichen in disbelief. In the next moment, the two of them fell backward. 2 6th-strength realm cultivators were dead. This is impossible. Edwin's face was full of disbelief. He had mastered the shadow maxim and was completely invisible. How could he be discovered? He looked at Zichen and said angrily, "I want you dead!" He dashed forward in an instant, and his figure disappeared in midair. Zichen's eyes were extremely cold. Just as the other party disappeared, his eyes lit up. Bright light. Under the light, he saw Edwin, who was hidden in the maxim. AI Duan's expression changed drastically because he felt as if he had been seen through by Zichen. Swoosh! Chapter 51-59. AI Duan's eyes lit up, and then he felt a pain in his head and heard a pop in his ears. The rule of shadow around him disappeared, and his body appeared out of thin air, crashing to the ground. When he landed on the ground, he stared at Zichen in disbelief. He had used the rule of shadow, so how could he be discovered? What was going on with Zichen's shining eyes? At this moment, Zichen walked forward and squatted beside him, saying, "Do you believe me now? If you don't need others to threaten you, you will die." With that, he slapped Edwin's head with his palm. With a boom, AI Duan's head smashed into the ground, and a powerful energy fluctuation scattered. His body twitched a few times, and then there was no movement. The three people who came were all dead. Duan, who was standing not far away, was clearly stunned. Even he did not dare to say that he had a chance of winning against AI Duan, but Zichen had killed him just like that. If the previous two people's deaths were due to carelessness, then AI Duan's death was due to the difference in strength. But Zichen clearly did not grasp the rule of shadow, so how could he accurately find AI Duan's position? Previously, Zichen had his back to Duan, so he did not see the light in Zichen's eyes. Zichen stepped forward and took the three people's rings. Then he dragged the three people and threw them out of the mansion. Zichen walked back and looked at Su Mengyao. "Are you okay?" Su Mengyao shook her head. Zichen pulled her into his arms and said apologetically, "I'm sorry." When the maidservants in the distance saw this scene, they were envious and moved. For their mistress, Zichen was willing to kneel on the ground and be humiliated. Now that he had killed the enemy, he was apologizing to their mistress. This time, seeing it with their own eyes, they were envious. Duan also shook his head. He could see that the relationship between the two was not ordinary. It was not an ordinary relationship between husband and wife. Su Mengyao also hugged Zichen tightly, and tears flowed again. "I'm the one who dragged you down. It has nothing to do with you. I'm just too weak." Chen thought that it would be safer for Su Mengyao to stay in Pofa City. After all, there were rules that forbade fighting. However, he did not expect that two groups of people who did not follow the rules would come. Su Mengyao returned to the room. Apparently, Chen and Du and I had not finished their conversation. Coming back to the living room, Du and I said, "I didn't expect them to come out so soon." Chen asked, "Then what is the law of shadow?" This was what he was most curious about. If it weren't for the immortal spiritual eye, he really might have been killed this time. As a fellow shadow destroyer, Chen did not know how to vanish. Du and I said, "It's said that the shadow destroyers comprehended the rules. After they died, the rules were forcefully stripped away. After the spell breakers fused with them, they gained this ability." Only spell breakers can fuse with it? Yes, only spell breakers can fuse with the shadow destroyer soul, but the success rate is not high. Du and I looked at Chen. As for you not knowing, it should be because you have not comprehended it. After all, they are only acquired shadow destroyers. They are different from you. After returning, Chen had spent most of his time dealing with trivial matters. He wanted to continue breaking through, so he had not comprehended the law of shadow destroyers. Now it seemed that he had a new goal. Chen asked more about the shadow destroyers, but Duni's knowledge was limited. After all, the shadow destroyers and spellbreakers were the core of Pofa City. Du and I only said that the shadow destroyers could really do whatever they wanted here, so he asked Chen to be careful. Of course, this shadow destroyer only targeted acquired shadow destroyers, not those who had awakened on their own like Chen. Chen also told him about the two newly discovered black stone mineral veins. According to the original agreement, Du and I would have a share after the mineral veins were discovered. Chen had planned to give him 30% of each mineral vein, but Du and I refused and only asked for 20%. According to him, he had not been able to help Chen this time. Chen did not decline too much. An additional 10% would increase the profits. After all, he had to deal with all the matters, and those people were also paid. Moreover, the people from Soul Mountain also needed black stone. The two of them reached an agreement. When they left, Du and I told Chen that although 3 had died, there were still other acquired shadow destroyers. Those people would definitely come again, and he asked Chen to be on guard in advance. Although he did not say it explicitly, his words implied that he wanted Su Mengyao to leave this place temporarily. Now, Su Mengyao had 2 places to go. One was outside Pofa City. The base could do it, and so could the black stone mineral veins. The other was Soul Mountain. The latter was safer. But this way, Su Mengyao would not be able to help him much. After sending Du and I off, Chen asked for Su Mengyao's opinion to see what she thought. After hearing Chen's words, Su Mengyao said directly, "Let's go to the black stone mineral vein." She knew that it was not wise to stay here now. On the second day, Chen brought Su Mengyao out of Pofa City and flew towards the black stone mineral vein. When they arrived, everything was almost ready and could start work at any time. Chen asked Miao Pengfei to bring some people and build a 2-story wooden building. It was right behind the area where the group of shadow destroyers stayed. Su Mengyao would stay here and deal with the matters here. Chen stayed here for 2 days and watched them start to mine the black stone mineral vein. Before he left Su Mengyao a ring containing all the resources she needed to advance to the 6-force estate, as well as many black stones. These black stones were prepared for the shadow destroyers. They were mined from the mineral vein. As for the black stones mined here, they were of higher quality. Chen did not plan to let the shadow destroyers use them for now. After all, they were still very weak. It would be a waste to use these high-quality black stones. Before he left, he told Miao Pengfei that if there was anything, he could discuss it with Su Mengyao. He believed that the next time Chen came out, Su Mengyao's cultivation level would definitely surprise him. After returning to Pofa City, Chen went to the Hall of Spiritual Spells. The acceptance work had already started and was not affected by him. Next, the prices of the 8 halls of spiritual spells would be the same, 10% off. Seeing that there were no problems here, Zichen went to the first black stone mineral vein to see Mi-Chi. After exchanging a few pleasantries with him, Zichen went to the second black stone mineral vein. Phoebe and the others were guarding here. During this time, the spiritual spellcasters wanted to rob this place. In the end, they joined forces and killed many people. After all, they were all spellbreakers and were not weak. Zichen gave each of them an inner core according to the agreement. He let them break through to the 6 force estate here and guard this place at the same time. After receiving the inner cores, they were very excited and thanked him repeatedly. After doing all this, Zichen returned to his residence and tried to understand the rules. Chapter 5160. The plot is not smooth, so I will stop updating for a day and update tomorrow. Thunder Marshal will stop updating for a day. Please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 5161. Zichen sat cross-legged and meditated to comprehend the rules, but to no avail. A whole day and night passed, and Zichen could not perceive any rules. All he could perceive was darkness. Recalling the methods of the 3 of them, Zichen calmed down again and released his own aura this time, the aura of a shadow destroyer. This should be the key to perceiving the rules. Sure enough, in just an hour after Zichen had completely calmed down, rules appeared before his eyes. These rules were completely different from what Zichen had seen before. They were like phantoms that flew past his eyes. He wanted to reach out and grab one, but he grabbed nothing. The rules streaked across his fingertips and disappeared like flowing water. After several attempts, Zichen's figure swept forward, ready to chase after these lights. But as he moved forward, the rules began to move backward, and both sides seemed to maintain an absolute distance. This repeated over and over again until Zichen felt weak. Only then did he withdraw his consciousness. After his consciousness returned, Zichen felt extremely tired, as if he had just experienced a great battle. However, he soon made a new discovery. He mobilized his own energy, and an illusory light appeared around him. The next moment, his body disappeared from where he stood. When the energy was removed, his body reappeared. This made Zichen's expression change abruptly. Could this be the shadow rule? He comprehended it just like that, so easily. He wanted to verify it, so he mobilized the rules again and then walked out of the door. However, he had only taken a single step when the energy around him disappeared. Zichen tried a few more times and found that as long as he stayed in place, he could become invisible. After taking a step, he would appear. In order to prove his guess, he walked out of the room, found a maid, and demonstrated it in front of her. As long as he did not leave, the other party would not be able to see him. But after taking a step, everything would return to normal. Under the maid's surprised expression, Zichen left. He judged his situation to be that of a beginner. Next, he would work hard to perceive and strive to gain something. He returned to his room and quietly waited for his body to recover. Once he recovered, he would continue to comprehend. Day after day passed. Zichen stayed in the shadow space, chasing after the many rules. After expending it, he would recover it. After recovering it, he would continue expending it. Zichen, who was sitting cross-legged, opened his eyes. His strength had completely recovered. This time we must succeed. Zichen once again entered the shadow space. The laws within should belong to the shadow destroyer. Zichen looked at these rules as they flashed before his eyes one by one. As Zichen stretched out his hand, the laws flowed through his fingertips. Shwa! In the next moment, Zichen exerted his strength, and like a bolt of lightning, he went straight for one of the rules. When he first came in, All the laws maintained the same distance from him. No matter how he went forward, he couldn't get close. After trying it out, Zichen realized that it was actually an illusion. It was just that the speed of the rules was so fast that it gave him a constant feeling. In fact, as long as he was fast enough, he could completely close the distance between the two sides. And after many days of experimentation, Zichen had already discovered a rule that was relatively slower. This time he suddenly accelerated and immediately closed the distance between the two sides. The rule immediately changed direction and shook off Zichen again. The aura around Zichen surged. The power of the Shadow Destroyer completely erupted. He sped up again and followed closely behind the rule. Then, the rule and Zichen were like two rays of light, chasing each other among the many rules. He was so close, but he couldn't catch up. As time passed, Zichen's consumption increased. If this continued, he would return empty-handed this time. Come here. There was a hint of coldness in his eyes. In the next moment, his soul power began to surge. The power of the Shadow Destroyer was displayed to the extreme. In an instant, Zichen sped up, rushed over, and grabbed the rule. Pa! The moment the rule was caught by Zichen, it exploded from his hand. It didn't shatter, but exploded. It turned into specks of flowing light and entered Zichen's body. In the room, Zichen opened his eyes. Light flowed around his body, carrying the rule unique to the Shadow Destroyer. There was a hint of joy in Zichen's eyes. At this moment, he had mastered the Shadow Rule. As he mobilized the power of the rule, his body disappeared. He left the room and walked in the mansion. While walking, he passed by the servant girls, but no one saw him. It seemed that this was the foundation of the Shadow Destroyer's power. After returning to the room, Zichen used a bit of power to recover his consumption. Then he began to cultivate again. The shadow space opened once again. Looking at the rules that appeared in front of him, Zichen's eyes lit up again. It seemed that the Shadow Rule was not one rule. As long as one had the ability, they could master many. He tried to pursue the second rule. This time, the gap between the two sides was even more obvious. At the very least, it would be difficult to catch it in a short time. After trying a few times, Zichen gave up because of the huge consumption. However, this also gave him a direction. As long as he stayed in this shadow space, he would make great progress. After coming back to his senses, Zichen's expression suddenly changed. His whole body fell backward. A sharp light suddenly flashed in front of him. He flipped over and looked in front of him. There was a person standing there. Shadow Destroyer? Zichen's expression changed. He didn't expect the other party to have killed his way here. The other party didn't speak and attacked again. A light flashed under Zichen's feet, and he dodged the other party's attack. Then he punched out, accompanied by a dull sound. The other party appeared from his hiding place. His body flew backward and smashed into the wall. Swoosh! A long sword appeared in Zichen's hand. He flashed forward and attacked the other party. "You can see me!" The other party's expression changed. He turned around and was about to escape. At this moment, the massacre spirit appeared and directly flitted between the other party's eyebrows. Zichen was not afraid of anyone in the same realm as him. Moreover, he had the massacre spirit. Poof! The massacre spirit instantly penetrated the other party's body. Just when Zichen thought that he would fall, the other party's body shook and split into two. One body was left on the spot, while the other rushed out of the door. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared. Chapter 5162. The last time Zichen came into contact with the rule of shadow, it was just a technique for invisibility. He had just captured it and refined it. Could it be that the other party was using the second technique? In the shadow space, there were many similar things. Zichen quickly rushed out of the room and looked around the mansion. When the maidservants noticed Zichen, they were all a little surprised. One of them stepped forward and seemed to want to say something to Zichen. Swoosh! Zichen's figure flashed and quickly rushed out of the mansion. Then he looked around. The streets were empty. The other party had long disappeared. Zichen tried to chase them down a few more streets, but found nothing. So he turned back and asked the servant girls if they had seen anything. In the end, they told him that they had not seen anything other than him. Back in the room, Zichen felt very lucky. If he had not woken up in time, his head might have left his body. He did not expect that the other party would still come for him. Zichen was much more careful after that. He encountered 2 more attacks along the way, but this time the enemies did not return. Zichen killed them on the spot. They were all in the 6th strength realm. Zichen did not know why they did not send 7th strength realm shadow destroyers. His daily routine was to enter the shadow space and refine black stones to recover after expending them. He repeated this cycle. The second mine had already started mining. Phoebe and the others were managing and guarding it. They were Dharma breakers. It was easy for them to do many things. Su Mengyao was in charge of the mine outside Dharma Breaking City. The black stone would be given to Xiao Lina first, and Xiao Lina would keep half of it. This half would be sold to Du and the other half would be kept in the mansion. After so many attacks, Zichen felt a lot of pressure. He did not sleep or rest, striving to break through again. On this day, Du and came to Zichen's mansion. It had been 2 months since the last time. Zichen! He shouted as soon as he arrived. Zichen withdrew from the shadow space. During this time, he had been trying to find a way to grasp the second shadow law, but he had not succeeded even once. What he had now was the most basic. Zichen walked out of the room and looked at Du and Let me tell you a piece of good news. Milord is prepared to use the law of shadow to exchange for the soul extinguishing stone. The soul extinguishing stone was the so-called black stone. As for the law of shadow, Zichen had been comprehending it recently. Zichen invited Du and in, and then listened to Du and talk about some things inside. Of course, the main reason was that the person behind Du and the neutral faction, wanted to see Zichen. While he was at it, he wanted to make a deal with him. Zichen said, "Recently, someone has been trying to assassinate me." Du and said helplessly, "It's those shadow destroyers. You saw it last time. I couldn't control them at all." Zichen nodded and said, "So this time I suspect it's another scheme." Du and immediately shook his head and said, "That's impossible. Milord Eugene isn't that bored. He's an 8 forces state cultivator, second only to the peak 9 forces state. How can he deal with you?" Du and thought for a moment and said, "However, it's not wrong to be careful. So you're willing to go?" Of course. Zichen wanted to take a look inside. He wanted to see the secrets inside. The next day, Du and took Zichen to the depths of Dharma Shattering City. Do you know why this place is called Dharma Shattering City? When they went deeper, Du and took the initiative to explain to Zichen because this city was built by the Dharma Shatters. This is also why the Dharma Shatters are always superior to others here. To be honest, they're the masters here. We're all outsiders. After a moment, Du and pointed ahead and said, "This is the entrance to the depths. After walking through here, we'll reach the place." There was a light wall in front of them that was constantly twisting. On the light wall, the flowing light looked like a flowing river of stars. Du and stepped into the light wall and signaled Zichen to follow. When Zichen entered the light wall, it was as if he was in another time and space. The scene of clusters of houses that he imagined did not appear. Instead, he saw some birds, insects, beasts, mountains, vegetation, and flowers on the side of the road. This was a completely different world from the outside world. It was not easy to see vegetation outside Dharma Shattering City, but here there were even flowers. And those beasts were not Dharma Shattering beasts. They were like small beasts in the outside world. There was no power around them. Obviously, they were just ordinary creatures. But in this place, it was even more difficult to see ordinary creatures. Zichen was immediately stunned. When I first came in, I was as surprised as you. I even had a strong illusion that I was in the outside world. Du and I looked at Zichen's surprised expression and said with a smile, "It said that a large-scale war broke out here, causing the rules of the world to change. Only this place remained intact." Zichen came back to his senses and secretly guessed. Could it be the war where the Shadow Destroyer was killed? Then Du and I led Zichen deeper. This place did not look like a city at all. It was more like a paradise. Everywhere was filled with a peaceful aura. Suddenly, Zichen's expression changed, and he quickly retreated. Chi! A sharp blade flashed past his eyes. Someone was ambushing him. Zichen's figure continued to retreat. Another ray of light flashed past him. Not only was someone ambushing him, but there was more than one. Seeing this, Du and I shouted, "It's Master Eugene who wants to see Zichen. What's the meaning of this?" A person appeared out of thin air. He glanced at Du and I and said, "This is none of your business. Get out of here." Du and I said, "Master Eugene." "Don't talk about Eugene. He can't control us." The other party coldly glanced at Du and I and then disappeared again. Zichen stood in place, his eyes turning cold. Du and I, step back first. It's just 4 rats. There's nothing to be afraid of. When he said this, Zichen was really angry. Whether this was a trap or not, he had to kill the intruder. There was no need to hide his strength. Zichen used his immortal spiritual eye and his vision became clearer. The aura of the Six-Force estate was fully released. At this moment, a person moved and charged straight at Zichen. Zichen's eyes flashed coldly. The massacre spirit flew out, turned into a stream of light, and slashed at the other party. At this moment, the other party's body swayed and turned into 2, avoiding Zichen's attack. At the same time, a shadow suddenly drilled out from the ground and slashed at Zichen's legs. Swoosh! Zichen tapped his foot and his body soared into the air. Behind Zichen, a third person launched a shadow attack. His entire body seemed to have turned into an arrow, heading straight for Zichen's back. Chi! Zichen turned around in the air and slashed down with his sword. The dazzling sword light illuminated the surroundings. Chapter 5163. The 4 Shadow Destroyers each used their own methods, wanting to kill Zichen together. Du and I stood in the distance, very anxious, but he could do nothing to help. Right now, he could not even see the enemy. Yesterday, he had confidently expressed that this was definitely not a trap. But as soon as he got here, a fatal trap came. Could it be the Lord's order? At this moment, in addition to anxiety, he felt ashamed. But there was no use in explaining. The most important thing now was to save Zichen. Zichen, hold on a little longer. I'll go find the Lord. After saying that, Du and I left quickly. Only Eugene could stop the 4 of them. Seeing Du and I leave, Zichen's eyes gradually turned cold. "Everyone, can't you live well?" What responded to him was a shadow that appeared behind him. Zichen's figure flashed, dodging the shadow's attack. He stood in the air, looking down indifferently at the 4 people below. The 4 slowly spread out, preparing for another ambush. "That's enough," Zichen said indifferently, then stretched out his arms. The 4 did not understand, so they did not immediately attack. Zichen closed his eyes and began to feel the world. Previously, with Du and I around, he was a little hesitant. Now that the enemy was in front of him, he had nothing to worry about. After arriving here, Zichen discovered that this was a complete world, and his state of mind changed. Thump! Thump! The 4 suddenly heard a vibration, like the beating of a drum. They hurriedly looked around, wanting to see who was beating the drum. There was no one. "It's him." Suddenly, a shadow destroyer pointed at Zichen and said in shock, "It's his heart." The beating of the drum was the beating of Zichen's heart. The golden heart began to beat violently. Every beat was like the beating of a drum. At the same time, Zi-Chan released his own soul. The soul formed from the black stone slowly expanded like an abyss. At this moment, Zi-Chen's heart and soul resonated. The energy that had been refined and stored in the heart was being fed back to Zi-Chen in an endless stream under this heaven and earth. There was also soul power gushing out from the soul abyss. Dong! 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 Zi-Chen's heart was still beating strongly and gradually regained its rhythm. The four of them stood there and suddenly felt as if their hearts were beating according to this rhythm. Gradually, everyone began to feel uncomfortable. Then, the power of heaven and earth gathered from all directions and madly converged on Zi-Chen. With him as the center, the energy of heaven and earth formed a huge vortex, and he was at the center of the vortex. How could this be? Is he going to break through? Their eyes were filled with shock. Such a phenomenon was indeed because Zi-Chen was about to break through, and the reason was because he had come to this complete space. Here, there was no need for Zi-Chen to repair the laws. The laws were complete, just like in the saint spirit domain. All the power of heaven and earth gathered towards him and then automatically transformed into the power that Zi-Chen needed. The four of them fell to the ground. They clutched their chests as if someone had stepped on their hearts. It was abnormally uncomfortable. Zi-Chen stood in the air and allowed the energy to enter his body. His aura began to grow. Luck played a large part in his breakthrough this time. Streaks of light appeared in front of his eyes. They were like shooting stars that streaked across his eyes. Zi-Chen knew that they were all laws, the law of shadow, but now they were no longer unreachable. They were right in front of him. It was as if he could reach out and grab them. Was this a reward for breaking through? Zi-Chen's heart skipped a beat. He thought of the scene when he broke through to the second power realm and comprehended the laws. However, there were many laws in front of him. Zi-Chen could not decide which one to choose. His soul power landed on one of the laws. Immediately, an image flashed in that law. In the image, one person split into two. Among the four of them, one of them knew this move and had just avoided the attack of the spirit of massacre. Next, Zi-Chen's consciousness landed again. This time he saw a shadow. It was very fast. Zi-Chen was a little envious. However, there were still many laws. He wanted to see more. His consciousness landed again. He saw different laws that contained different abilities. Some were offensive, some were defensive. Finally, Zi-Chen saw a shadow-killing technique. There were only 3 techniques that could catch his eye. The first was one to split into 2, similar to the doppelganger technique. The second was speed. This was the capital. And the third was the shadow-killing technique. He was mainly hesitating between the second and third. He did not know which to choose. Time was of the essence. Zi-Chen could not be allowed to think for a long time. Thus, he gritted his teeth and chose the killing technique. The laws entered his body. He completely accepted the shadow-killing technique. He could not be bothered to study it carefully. He looked at the 4 shadow destroyers again. They were still on the ground. Their auras had become very weak. They looked at Zi-Chan with horror in their eyes. The sound of their hearts beating had a strange rhythm. It was almost shattering their hearts. Even if they defended with all their might, they still could not resist that sound. Zi-Chan looked at the 4 of them. There was a cold, murderous intent in his eyes. They had come to kill him. There was no need to keep them. Just then, Duanai came out with his men and saw this scene. He was taken aback. Zi-Chen looked back at the 2. His gaze fell on the man. You actually broke through. Not bad. Eugene smiled. Then he looked at the 4 and said coldly, You guys are really bold. Zi-Chen is my guest. You dare to attack him? The 4 got up, not daring to respond. They were not afraid of Eugene, but of Zi-Chen. They had clearly sensed Zi-Chen's murderous intent. If Eugene hadn't come in time, Zi Chen would definitely have killed them. When he was at the 6th strength realm, they could still fight. Now that Zi Chen was at the 7th strength realm, they were no match for him. What are you still doing here? Hurry up and get lost. Hearing Eugene's words, the 4 of them quickly turned and left. Zi Chen did not stop them, even though he wanted to kill them. But since Eugene had spoken, he had to give him face. Zi Chen, this is Master Eugene. Du and I quickly stepped forward to introduce him. Zi Chen cupped his fists at Eugene. Just then his heart suddenly moved, because he felt something on his own body. It was a long-lost perception. It was the Black Tower. After coming here, Zi Chen hadn't sensed the Black Tower until this time when he broke through. At the same time, he remembered what Su Mengyao had said. Perhaps the Black Tower could take him back. In an instant, Zi Chen was in a good mood. If Eugene was not here, he would definitely take out the Black Tower to study it. Chapter 5164. Eugene talked and laughed along the way, explaining the surrounding environment to Zi Chen. It was unknown whether it was because he was hospitable or because he had advanced to the 7th strength state. Du and I followed behind in silence. Zi Chen walked among the rocks and looked at the beasts jumping and running in the distance. He thought that their meat should be very delicious. After all, this kind of thing was very rare here. They came to Eugene's residence. It was a small 2-story courtyard with green vegetation on both sides of the wall and some flowers occasionally. The 3 of them sat down in the house, and Eugene said, I called you here to do business with you. I have a few Shadow Destroyer rules here. If you like them, you can exchange them with soul stones. Zi Chen smiled and said, If you need soul stones, just let Dun say hello. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Take a look first. See if you like them. Eugene waved his hand, and a few rules appeared in front of him. They emitted a very bright light. Zi Chen picked up a rule and used his soul power to sense it. His mood changed, because this rule came from a dead Shadow Destroyer. It was a real Shadow Destroyer, not a fake one. Where did this rule come from? Eugene took out a total of 3 rules. Zi Chen picked them up and checked them one by one. It was passed down a long time ago. Each of us would buy a few and try to refine them. Eugene smiled bitterly and said, But we tried many times and got nothing. Did you find any that caught your eye? Zi Chen shook his head and said, I feel that if I refine them, my advancement will be blocked. It's better to comprehend them myself. Eugene said enviously, I really envy you. We can't even refine them, but you don't like them. Eugene stood up and said, Let's go. I'll take you to take a look. Zi Chen's eyes flashed. He couldn't believe what Eugene said. Dun was also surprised. Eugene didn't explain the reason. Instead, he walked straight out of the room. Zi Chen and Dunny looked at each other. Dunny shook his head, indicating that he didn't know what was going on. The 3 of them walked all the way into the depths. There were much fewer buildings here, and there were some things that looked like fake mountains everywhere. Eugene was familiar with the place and led Zi Chen all the way in. In Zi Chen's perception, an unusual aura soon appeared. He felt a strong sense of danger, and his expression became unnatural. Eugene noticed the change in Zi Chen's expression and explained, The real big shots live here. Zi Chen's eyes flashed, and he suddenly understood. The so-called big shot was naturally the 9 Forces realm. Suddenly, Zi Chen thought of something and asked, Is there anyone who has surpassed the 9 Forces state in this world? Eugene smiled and shook his head. It seemed that the 9 Forces state was the pinnacle of existence. Eugene led Zi Chen all the way to the depths. There was an ancient altar here, and there were some stone pillars outside the altar. The stone pillars were carved with vicissitudes of life, and the surroundings were dilapidated. After arriving here, Zi Chen could clearly feel that the pressure on his body had increased. Dun's face had already turned pale. Usually, this place was like a forbidden area that forbade them from coming here. Even though he had been in the depths for so long, he had never been here. Why was he making an exception today? Eugene pointed at the altar and said, "This was originally an ascension platform. It is said that those who come here, once their realm is high enough, can go directly to the immortal spell world through this place." Zi Chen's expression changed when he heard this. This was the secret he had always wanted to know. He didn't expect it to appear in front of him now. Looking at the altar again, it was already dilapidated. Many of the stone pillars were also broken. Clearly, it was no longer usable. As expected, Eugene's next words confirmed his guess. It's just that this ascension platform was destroyed in a great battle and is no longer usable. We lost the chance to go to the immortal spell world and can only stay here. Zi Chen sketched out a picture in his mind. He divided the world into the first, second, and third levels. The world that he had reincarnated in was the first level, which was also the lowest level. After breaking the seal that Lei Tianshi had left behind, he had come to the Saint Spirit world. This was the second level world, which was also the middle world. This world extended horizontally and was divided into the worlds of the gods, demons, as well as Xios and the other monitors. It was also the myriad worlds that Xios wanted to connect to. At the same time, the trial world and this strange Dharma breaker world also belonged to the second level. It was just that it wasn't connected to the myriad worlds and was considered a hidden world. And the highest level world was the immortal spell world. Many years ago, the upper, middle, and lower realms were all connected. After reaching a certain realm, one could easily ascend. Zi Chen's birthplace had been sealed by Lei Tianshi, and the passage between the Saint Spirit world and the immortal spell world had never been opened after Gushan left. It was unknown who had sealed it. At the same time, the passages between the other worlds and the immortal spell world were sealed, as well as the passage between here and the immortal spell world. In other words, the middle and upper levels were completely cut off, and the people here couldn't ascend. The people of the Saint Spirit world and the myriad worlds couldn't ascend either. Those overseers could not return either. Therefore, Xios wanted to connect to the myriad worlds and use the trial world as the foundation to build an immortal spell world that belonged to him. Zi Chen looked at the sacrificial altar before him. This was also a dead end, no different from the Saint Spirit world. The only difference was that one's cultivation level could still improve here, unlike the Saint Spirit world, where the demon was the end. Is there a way to open it? Zi Chen suddenly asked. If it could be opened, then he could go to the immortal spell world from here. Eugene shook his head. Generations have tried many times, but to no avail. Eugene, how dare you bring two outsiders to this ascension platform? Suddenly, a cold voice rang out, and a person walked over from afar. Eugene looked at the person but didn't speak. I'm talking to you. Didn't you hear me? The person shouted angrily at Eugene, and his eyes turned cold. This is the Lord's idea. If you have any objections, you can look for the Lord. Eugene didn't have a good attitude towards this person. Is it your Lord or all the Lords? Didn't we agree that no outsiders are allowed to come here? Chapter 5165. The newcomer was in the 8 forces state. He stared at Zi Chen and Du and I with an aggressive attitude. Martin, don't go too far. This is Master's order. Eugene glared at him. Master asked me to bring Zi Chen here. You spellbreakers, aren't you going too far? Your master doesn't have the final say here, does he? Martin looked at Eugene. He was not afraid at all, even though Eugene had brought up the so-called adults. I don't have the final say, but you do? At this moment, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded. There was one more person in the field. As soon as he appeared, there was a strong pressure around him. When Zi Chen and Du and I felt the pressure, they felt a sense of discomfort. Martin's face was pale. He was targeted by the aura. No wonder he was the #1 spiritual cultivator. Just the aura alone was so terrifying. Outsiders are forbidden here. Ji Hong, do you still follow the rules? Who knew that Martin would still be tough when he saw the nine-force estate? Even though his face was pale, he couldn't resist the pressure. Zi Chen has joined us. He's not an outsider. Du and I is one of us. The nine forces state stared at Martin. Tell me, how are you not following the rules? Fortunately, the aura was gone. What, you said Zi Chen joined you? Martin's eyes flashed. Are you sure? Otherwise, why would I bring him here? Coldness flashed in Ji Hong's eyes. Others don't feel anything wrong. You're just an eight-force estate. Who do you think you are? The next moment, Ji Hong waved his sleeve and Martin flew out. He roared in anger from afar, but he didn't come back to find trouble. Master, Eugene immediately saluted Ji Hong. Ji Hong waved his hand and said, I want to talk to Zi Chen. Eugene understood and left with Du and I. Zi Chen looked at Ji Hong. He didn't know what Ji Hong wanted to say to him. This is the situation of a spiritual cultivator. Even if you're one level higher, you have no advantage in front of a spellbreaker. Ji Hong smiled faintly and said, This time I've let you see a joke. Zi Chen didn't say anything because he didn't know how to respond. Spellbreakers were always superior to others here. Ji Hong waved his hand, and energy spread out in all directions, enveloping the surroundings. He walked towards the ascension platform and gently touched the stone pillars. The ascension platform has been destroyed for a long time. It's almost impossible to rebuild it. Do you know why? Zi Chen shook his head. This was his first time here. So how could he know the secrets of this place? Ji Hong looked up at the sky and said, Because this was built by the immortal spells world. The construction methods of that era have long been lost. Zi Chen nodded. Ji Hong stood on the ascension platform and looked in a certain direction. Watch carefully. He waved his hand and slashed. An arc of light appeared in his field of vision. The arc of light was like a saber light, carrying an unparalleled saber intent. When Zi Chen saw this move, he was completely stunned. In his mind, a move that he hadn't seen in a long time appeared. The small mountain peak in front was immediately split into two by the saber arc. This was the mountain chopping technique. Do you know him? Ji Hong looked at Zi Chen. Zi Chen nodded, but quickly shook his head. I don't know him. Ji Hong smiled and said, If you don't know him, then forget it. Zi Chen found it difficult to calm down, because that was indeed the mountain chopping technique, a unique technique of Gushan. Back then, Gushan had personally demonstrated this move to kill demons. Do you know why I can stand here in this place controlled by the spellbreakers? Ji Hong asked again. Zi Chen still shook his head. Ji Hong looked up at the sky, then slashed with one hand again. Chi! The previous saber arc appeared again, but this time there was an additional kind of absolute will. It pressed forward with indomitable will, unstoppable. A huge crack appeared in the sky, and the light of the Milky Way appeared in the crack. Zi Chen was stunned. Did he shatter space? Ji Hong said, This move is called heaven chopping, an advanced version of mountain chopping. Heaven chopping? Zi Chen's expression changed, because he only knew how to chop mountains. And now, Ji Hong admitted that this was Gu Shan's mountain chopping technique. Ji Hong nodded and said, Yes, heaven chopping. It is said that this technique has a total of 3 moves, namely mountain chopping, heaven chopping, and the final immortal chopping. Speaking of this, there was a touch of regret on his face. Unfortunately, the power of immortal chopping can only be used in the immortal spell world. Zi Chen had something to ask now, but he didn't know how to ask. Miao Miao and the others had been with Gushan for a long time. They all knew the power and terror of the mountain chopping technique, but they had never heard of heaven chopping and immortal chopping after mountain chopping. Could it be that Gushan's mountain chopping technique was also learned from somewhere else, so it was incomplete? At this moment, Zichen really wanted to worm his way into being friends with the other party and ask him some questions. After all, the two of them might have a common acquaintance. But he couldn't, because this was the first time they met, and he didn't have absolute trust in him. In this world, the laws that one comprehends are ultimately a manifestation of one's willpower. Looking at Zichen's changing expression, Jihong said, "For example, fire." He raised his hand, and a ball of flame appeared in the palm of his hand. The next moment he swung his hand, and the flame landed on the severed mountain peak in the distance. The mountain peak began to burn. Not only was the vegetation ignited, but even the stones were ignited. This went against common sense. Are you surprised? Jihong said again, "Laws are just something you comprehend, but how you use it determines its power. For example, its function is not to ignite, but to explode." Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, the entire mountain peak exploded. Zichen's expression was one of shock. Jihong said, "Look, it's actually like this. As for whether it ignites or explodes, it's just a manifestation of will." In the palm of his hand, there was still a ball of flame, a flame that looked very gentle. But after it was used, it could ignite the stones and produce an explosive force. The confused Zichen's eyes suddenly lit up. This principle was very simple. It was like one's own energy, which was originally contained in one's body, but if one wanted to make it work, it depended on how one used it. For example, Zichen's method was destruction, and that was the form of destruction. In Jihong's hands, it was the form of fire. No matter how many changes there were, it was still the same. Zichen raised his hand, and the wind from his palm was like a knife. Buzz! A knife arc appeared in his hand and went straight ahead. This time, the knife arc was no longer a pure energy attack, but also contained the laws that Zichen had comprehended. The mountain peak in front of him was instantly split into two when it met the knife arc. This was the mountain cutting technique, a technique that shouldn't appear in this world. In other words, this was a foreign technique that had fused with the laws of this world. You can go back now. If you have any trouble in the future, you can look for Eugene directly. Chapter 5166. After saying this, Jihong disappeared. Zichen stood where he was, somewhat in a daze. He recognized the mountain chopping technique, but did not admit it. However, at that moment, because he had an epiphany, he displayed the mountain chopping technique again. The other party did not ask, and left just like that. However, the words he left behind were very intriguing. A moment later, Eugene came. He looked at Zichen. "Let's go." Zichen nodded and left with Eugene. "As for the soul stones, we'll still buy them at the price we agreed on. There's no need to feel burdened. The distribution of resources inside will be arranged by us." On the way back, Eugene said, "As long as you have the soul stones, there will be resources inside." After a pause, Eugene continued, "Actually, spellbreakers usually don't manage these things and leave it to the spirit casters. However, some of the spirit casters are too radical." Along the way, Eugene told Zichen some things inside. Zichen listened quietly. However, at this moment, he could not hide his calm heart. On one hand, the mountain chopping technique had reappeared. On the other hand, the Black Tower had reappeared. He needed to verify some of the guesses in his heart. Eugene sent Zichen to the entrance. At the same time, he told Zichen that if there was anything, he could ask Du and I to send him a message. If he could help, he would definitely not refuse. After Zichen thanked him, he immediately walked out. He did not return to his own residence. Instead, he went out of Spellbreaker City and flew towards the Black Stone Vein. Along the way, he made a trip to the Slaughter Crystal Mine and called out Yuan Sha from underground. Yuan Sha appeared. The Slaughter spirit flew towards the other party. Yuan Sha disappeared with the Slaughter spirit. Zi left the Kill Crystal Vein and went to the Black Stone Vein to find Su Mengyao. Su Mengyao had her own residence here. Zi-Chen's arrival surprised Su Mengyao. Then, Zi-Chen took out the Black Tower in front of her. "It's the Black Tower." A light flashed in Su Mengyao's eyes. It appeared. Then, Su Mengyao said, "You broke through?" The current Zi-Chen did not mobilize his energy, nor did he reveal his cultivation base. Zi-Chen nodded. "Did Miao Miao say how to use the Black Tower?" Zi-Chen asked. Su Mengyao shook her head, no. Zi-Chen looked at the Black Tower. Actually, this question was a waste of time. The Black Tower had a total of 7 levels, and he was very clear about what was on the first 6 levels. Miao Miao, Shueshang, and the others had all come from there. However, regardless of whether it was Miao Miao or the others, none of them had mentioned the 7th floor. At that time, it seemed that everyone had neglected this place. No matter what, he had to enter the 7th floor to take a look. Back then, in the first 6 levels, there was a demon on each level. At that time, they were all demons, and they were at the highest level that the Saint Spirit Realm could contain. Then what was on the 7th floor? Zi-Chen wasn't looking forward to it, only heaviness. But now he had no choice but to take a look. Because his friends were still in deep trouble, Zi-Chen took a deep breath and said, "I have to go in and take a look." Su Mengyao, who was already in the 5-strength state, said, "I'll guard you." With the support of Zi-Chen's many resources, Su Mengyao had now advanced to the 5-strength state. However, Zi-Chen was very clear that a large part of the reason was that Su Mengyao was extraordinary. The resources he gave were only supplementary. Now, even when he looked at Su Mengyao, he felt that he couldn't see through her. Zi-Chen's figure flashed, and he entered the Black Tower. This thing was left behind by Gushan, so it was naturally extraordinary. Zi-Chen stood on the 6th floor. He had come here once before, and besides a cloak, he didn't see anything. Then he walked out. Who knew that the cloak was Shueshang? However, this time, when he stood on the 6th floor again, there was no one here. Moreover, the entrance to the 7th floor that he couldn't sense previously had appeared. After a slight hesitation, he walked up. When he arrived at the 7th floor and saw the environment here, Zi-Chen's expression immediately changed. A hint of shock appeared in the bottom of his eyes. The first 6 floors, except for the place where Miao Miao was, were all worlds, very big worlds. And this was a space. In this space, there were countless strange flowers and herbs. They seemed to be rooted in the void, absorbing the power of the void. Regardless of whether it was the spirit flowers or the herbs, they all emitted the aura of time. It was unknown how long they had existed, and their spiritual power was extremely abundant. In front of him was a treehouse, and at the top of the treehouse there were many fruits. Zi-Chen only took a glance, and he knew that the quality of these fruits was not inferior to the tree of the lightning ancestor. This place was like a secluded paradise. A path paved with countless gems appeared under Zi-Chen's feet. Zi-Chen didn't go forward, because this was the 7th floor of the Black Tower, and it was destined to be an extremely extraordinary place. The door of the treehouse opened, and a woman walked out. She was like a fairy in the sky, beautiful and unparalleled. She leaned against the door and looked at Zi-Chen. "You should have come earlier." Zi-Chen looked at her, not knowing what to say. "If you had come to find me earlier, you wouldn't have had to leave your home," the woman said. Zi-Chen thought of the scene when he was forced by Seuss. Could it be that at that time he would have been able to get help by coming here? He opened his mouth, but still didn't say anything. His mood had suffered a huge blow. "What, are you regretting it? Feeling wronged? Or even angry?" The woman looked at Zi-Chen. "Do you want to ask why I didn't come out earlier to save you since I knew?" Zi-Chen still didn't say anything. The beautiful woman suddenly said with grievance, "I'm trapped here and can't get out. Even if I want to help you, you have to come in, right? Don't you think I'm more wronged?" Zi-Chen couldn't see through her, so he still didn't say anything. The woman smiled again, and her mood seemed to change a lot. Hee, I'm lying. If I wanted to go out, I would have left long ago. No one can stop me. Chen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The woman's face suddenly became cold. But why should I help you? Why should I help you? The woman was temperamental. Chen felt that she would be difficult to deal with. How should I address you, Senior? Why are you here? Chen finally opened his mouth and asked while clasping his fists, Senior, do I look old? The woman's eyes became colder. Just when Chen wanted to save her, she sighed and said, Yes, it's been many years. Although you're still beautiful, I've seen you for countless years. As for why I'm here, the woman's emotions, which had just calmed down, suddenly exploded again. Of course, it's because I'm trapped here by a heartless man. Chen felt that a storm had appeared in his mind. His 7th-strength realm soul felt like it was going to collapse under the storm. At the same time, he also felt the woman's anger in the storm. He was shocked. What realm was she at? Just by showing her anger. His soul almost couldn't bear it. However, the storm came and went quickly. The woman sighed faintly. But I know that he's doing it for my own good. He wants me to live. But how does he know that this is what I want? Sometimes living is scarier than death. Chen listened quietly and didn't disturb her. In fact, he didn't know what to say. Silence was a better choice. The woman suddenly pointed to the side. You can leave from there. After saying that, she closed the door again. Chen's gaze shifted to the side, where another path paved with gemstones of various colors had appeared. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.